Chapter 152. Jinshin chuckled and said, I don't dare. Sir Mu Jian really thinks too highly of me. I presume that the reason why you guys enter the magical Beast Mountain range is also to find me. That's right, we came here to catch you. As soon as Jinshin's voice faded, the big man who was stopped by Mu Jian a moment ago loudly said. The big man's words caused Mu Jian's complexion to change slightly. He turned his head and fiercely glared at the big man, causing the big man's face to be filled with confusion. Mu Jian cupped his hands towards Jinshin and said with a chuckle, Sir Jinshin, we entered the magical Beast Mountain range just to watch the fun. We didn't have any intention of catching Sir. It seems that Sir must have misunderstood us. Misunderstood? Jinshin said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. If I didn't hear wrong, I seem to have heard the friend beside you say that you guys entered the magical Beast Mountain range to catch me. How could it be a misunderstanding? Hearing this, Mu Jian's face revealed a trace of embarrassment. They had indeed entered the magical Beast Mountain range to catch Jinshin. Although they had heard of Jinshin's strength before, and there were several Saint Masters who had died in his hands, those were, after all, just rumors. Many people still maintained a skeptical attitude towards the rumors, and Mu Jian's group was no exception. But after personally witnessing Jinshin's strength, Mu Jian immediately judged that they weren't Jinshin's match. Even if they had the advantage in numbers, they still wouldn't be able to catch Jinshin. Moreover, they would also have to suffer considerable losses. Moreover, Mu Jian was also very clear that if Jinshin had wanted to take the lives of those two, they would have already been lying on the ground. Therefore, at this moment, Mu Jian had already given up on the idea of catching Jinshin. At the very least, at this moment, he still couldn't have a conflict with Jinshin. Otherwise, the ones who would suffer losses would only be his group. Seeing that Mu Jian didn't speak, Jinshin opened his mouth again and said, I also don't want to indiscriminately kill the innocent. Hand over all the magic cores in your spatial belts as payment for your lives. If not, then don't blame me, Jinshin, for being vicious and merciless. Towards the end of his words, a trace of intense killing intent flashed through Jinshin's eyes. Hearing Jinshin's words, the dozen or so people in front of him all revealed expressions of anger and disdain. Among them, not all of them had eyes as bright as Mu Jian's. Jinshin, you despicable person who only knows how to use sneak attacks, what qualifications do you have to say such words? Come and eat your grandfather's sword. Jinshin's words angered quite a few people. Immediately, a tall and sturdy man holding a two-handed greatsword aggressively rushed towards Jinshin. Wait! Mu Jian's figure flashed and blocked that burly man. Ignoring that burly man's furious gaze, he turned his head to look at Jinshin and said in a deep voice, Jinshin, we have no intention of becoming enemies with you. Could it be that you really want to force us? A cold smile appeared on Jinshin's face as he said, I'll still say the same thing. Hand over your magic cores, and I'll let you go. Otherwise, I'll have to do it myself. After saying that, Jinshin paused for a moment before continuing, However, if we really fight, then don't blame me for the deaths and injuries that occur. Jinshin's words left no room for discussion, causing Mu Jian's expression to become somewhat gloomy. He said in a deep voice, as the saying goes, leave a line for everything, and it will be easier to deal with in the future. Sire Jinshin, aren't you going a little too far? The magic cores in his spatial belt were the result of him and the others risking their lives to hunt magical beasts in the magical Beast Mountain range. After that, he had accumulated them over a long period of time. Although Mu Jian knew that if he and the others were to fight with Jinshin, they would definitely suffer some injuries, but it was impossible for them to hand over all the magic cores that they had painstakingly accumulated over a long period of time. Mu Jian, why are you speaking so much nonsense with him? Why don't you just directly capture him? He's just one person, and he wants all of us to hand over all the magic cores in our pouches. That's simply a huge joke. A middle-aged man with golden hair, standing behind Mu Jian, said in a deep voice. His tone was full of disdain. Jinshin, although you have injured two of us brothers, that was only because you used a sneak attack. If we were to fight you head-on, then even if we were to attack you together, you still wouldn't necessarily be our match. In the end, the most that would happen would be both sides suffering injuries. That wouldn't be good for either of us, especially you. If you were to be seriously injured, then it would be very disadvantageous for you. After all, in the magical Beast Mountain range, there are people everywhere who would want to capture you. Either we let this matter go, or we fight to the death. In short, if you want us to hand over our magic cores, then that's absolutely impossible. The one who spoke was a tall man. It was obvious that he could tell that Jinshin wasn't weak from Jinshin's actions. Jinshin's eyes flashed with a cold light. He slowly raised his light wind sword and said in a deep voice, "Since that's the case, then let's fight." After saying that, he rushed towards the 10 people in front of him. Mu Jian didn't waste any more words and rushed forward with the 10 people behind him. The 10 people immediately began to fight. Every one of these 10 people had the strength of a Saint Master. If it was before, Jianshan would have a hard time defending against the encirclement of 10 Saint Masters. But now, with his strength at the Saint Master level, he could easily deal with the encirclement of more than 10 Saint Masters. Jianshan relied on his profound footwork and his sword, which was so fast that even Saint Masters found it hard to block, to fight evenly with the dozen or so Saint Masters. Even though Jianshan was at an absolute disadvantage in terms of numbers, it didn't take long before the dozen or so people were gradually forced into a disadvantageous position by Jianshan. During this period of time, there were a few people who were almost stabbed in the throat by Jianshan, but they were always saved by the people beside them at the crucial moment. Even though that was the case, there were still quite a few people who were injured by Jianshan. Jianshan's movements were like a ghost as he shuttled through the crowd, dodging the attacks coming from all directions. The light wind sword in his hand was so fast that it became a blur. As the light wind sword danced in the air, the friction between it and the air created a small sound that seemed to form a straight line. Pooh! The tip of the light wind sword was filled with sword chi as it pierced through one of the people's right arm joints. At the same time, the sword chi drilled into the person's body, destroying the function of his right arm. That person immediately let out a painful cry as the large sword in his hand disappeared. His right shoulder had been pierced through, and he no longer had the strength to hold a weapon and had lost the ability to fight. Chapter 153. An injury to the right shoulder would directly affect one's ability to wield a weapon and display their strength. The injuries of those who had been pierced by Jinshin's light wind sword were far more severe than they had imagined. The light wind sword's sharp sword chi had already damaged their right shoulder, causing them to lose the ability to fight. The injured people could only helplessly retreat as Jianshan and the other 10 people continued to fight. The sounds of weapons clashing constantly rang out on the battlefield. The powerful shockwaves of Saint Force swept out in all directions with everyone at the center pressing some of the weeds to the ground. Dust flew into the air, obscuring the figures of the people fighting, making it difficult to see them clearly. From time to time, there would be a few screams mixed with pain. Soon after, there would be people who would be sent flying or covered in blood as they retreated from the battlefield. Of the 10 people fighting in the battlefield, there were constantly people who were injured. Not long after, the original 10 people had shrunk down to only a few people. The intense movements made Jianshan's figure look somewhat miserable, but his body was not injured in the slightest. After blocking a saint weapon, Jinshin's light wind sword once again turned into a silver light and pierced through the opponent's right shoulder before they could react. I don't want to kill the innocent. I'll give you one last chance. If you continue to be stubborn, then don't blame me for killing you. Jianshan did not stop at all. He called out as killing intent flickered in his eyes. Clearly, he was ready to kill. Previously, he had already been merciful to these people. If they continued to be stubborn, then he would have no choice but to kill them. In the Tian Yuan continent, this kind of thing was very common, so Jianshan did not feel that he had done anything wrong. After all, this was a world where strength was respected. The strong could cover the sky with one hand and do whatever they wanted, but the weak never had the right to speak. Now that so many mercenaries and various powers had entered the mountain range of magical beasts, almost all of them had the goal of capturing Jianshan and handing him over to the Tianxiong clan for a reward. Even the 10 or so people on the other side were no exception. If not for the fact that Jinshin's strength was greater than theirs, perhaps the situation would have been completely different. When he heard these words, a struggling expression appeared on the face of the middle-aged man, called Mu Jian. His gaze swept across the few injured men who had lost their ability to fight. Finally, he clenched his teeth and shouted, "Stop!" Mu Jian's prestige in the hearts of these people was not weak. As soon as he spoke, those who were still fighting with Jianshan immediately retreated. Each and every one of them looked at Jianshan with fear lingering in their hearts. But most of their gazes were focused on the light wind sword in Jianshan's hand. With regards to the lightning-fast speed of a light wind sword, they had personally experienced it. Each and every one of them was terrified. In the battle just now, they had almost been injured by the light wind sword several times. Fortunately, they had been saved in the nick of time. Mu Jian looked at Jianshan with a complicated expression. His gaze paused on the blood-stained light wind sword in Jianshan's hand. With a dispirited expression, he weakly said, "Everyone, take out all of your demon cores. Sir Jianshan has already shown us mercy. Otherwise, you wouldn't have just been injured." This time, no one was unconvinced. The 10 or so people all had dispirited expressions on their faces as they silently took out all of their demon cores from their space belts and piled them on the ground. After the battle, just now, all of them understood that even if they all attacked together, they still wouldn't be a match for the young man in front of them. The speed of the light wind sword was so fast that even if they used all of their strength to block, they would only be able to last a few rounds. These 10 or so Saint Masters all had quite a few demon cores on them. Although there weren't many demon cores of the 3rd level, there were quite a few demon cores of the 1st and 2nd level. "Jianshan, this is all of our demon cores. Can we leave now?" Mu Jian's expression was not very good as he spoke in a low voice. Jianshan's gaze swept across the small pile of demon cores on the ground. His face couldn't help but reveal a trace of smile as he said, "If you had taken them out earlier, then wouldn't all of this have been fine? All right, Jianshan, do not dare call myself a gentleman, but I am someone who keeps my promises. You all can leave now." Mu Jian and the others' gazes paused on the small pile of demon cores on the ground for a while. Their eyes revealed a trace of reluctance as they helplessly let out a sigh and left with a sense of loss. Although there weren't many demon cores, there were still a few dozen years' worth of demon cores. "Remember, I don't want to see you try to deal with me again. Otherwise, I won't give you any face. It's best if you all leave the Devil Beast Mountain range." Before the 10 or so people had even taken a few steps, Jianshan's calm voice sounded out from behind them. Hearing these words, Mu Jian and the others' bodies paused for a moment, but no one said anything. Very quickly, they disappeared into the dense forest. Jianshan put away the light wind sword and slowly walked towards the pile of demon cores. He bent down and collected all of them into his spatial belt. There were about 200 demon cores in this small pile. Most of them were demon cores of the 1st and 2nd level. There were less than 20 demon cores of the 3rd level. After collecting all of the demon cores into his spatial belt, Jianshan unhurriedly straightened his body. His face revealed a trace of a cold smile as he suddenly said, "Friend, you've been here for so long and have seen enough. Isn't it time for you to come out?" "Ha ha!" Just as Jianshan's voice fell, a loud laughter sounded out from the forest. Immediately after, a gray figure shot out like lightning and landed about 20 meters away from Jianshan. The person who came was an old man. He looked to be about 50 or 60 years old. The old man's face was flushed red, and his pair of bright eyes were filled with vigor. Behind his back, there were a few strands of silver mixed in with messy hair that draped over his shoulders. He looked a bit down and out. The old man was wearing a gray robe, and his stature was a bit taller than Jianshan. Although he was just standing there, Jianshan could feel an invisible pressure enveloping him. Facing this old man, Jianshan didn't dare to lower his guard. His face became serious as he stared at the old man and slowly said, "Great Saint Master." Chapter 154. Jianshan took a deep breath. Although he had already guessed that there would be a great Saint Master level expert who wouldn't be able to resist the temptation of 10,000 purple crystal coins and come to deal with him, he didn't think that he would encounter one so quickly. However, Jianshun didn't feel the slightest bit of fear. Although he didn't dare say that he could defeat a great Saint Master level expert, he was still confident that he could protect himself. At the same time, Jianshun was also secretly rejoicing. Fortunately, he had the foresight to raise his strength from a great saint to a Saint Master level expert. Otherwise, if he faced a great Saint Master with his original strength, he would have no choice but to run. Facing a great Saint Master, even though Jianshun felt an extremely great pressure, he quickly calmed down. His pair of calm eyes didn't have the slightest bit of emotion as he calmly stared at the old man before him. He opened his mouth and said, "Old sir, could it be that you've also come to capture me because of the temptation of 10,000 purple crystal coins?" "Little child, you already know the answer. This old man won't waste words with you. Are you going to obediently come with me? Or do you want this old man to personally take action? However, you have to understand that this old man isn't as easy to deal with as those 10 Saint Masters from before." The old man looked at Jianshun with a relaxed expression, as if he didn't put Jianshun in his eyes at all. Jianshun coldly snorted as the light wind sword appeared in his right hand. Jianshun pointed the tip of the sword at the ground and proudly said, "Giving up without putting up a fight has never been my Jianshun style. Old sir, let this one experience your skills." As soon as he finished speaking, Jianshun's body turned into a ghost, leaving behind afterimages as he rushed towards the old man. The short distance of 20 meters was crossed in the blink of an eye. The light wind sword in Jianshun's hand was covered in a layer of hazy sword aura as it turned into a silver light that pierced towards the old man's throat. The old man's nonchalant expression disappeared in an instant and was replaced with a dignified expression. Saint Chi surged from his palm and formed into a foot-long dagger. The dagger flickered with a cold light as it flew towards the light wind sword. When the light wind sword and the old man's dagger collided in midair, a clear sound rang out. Immediately after, a powerful shockwave of Saint Chi spread out in all directions from the collision of the two weapons. Wherever the shockwave of Saint Chi came into contact with it, the surrounding weeds were immediately torn apart. When the shockwave of Saint Chi reached the ground, the soft soil on the ground was pressed down by the shockwave. A light groan came from Jianshun's throat as Jianshun's body uncontrollably retreated a few meters. Every step he took left a deep imprint in the ground. A great Saint Master really is strong. I didn't think that after reaching the Saint Master level, there would still be such a large gap between me and a great Saint Master. Jianshun thought to himself. This time, he was clearly at a disadvantage. After all, this time, Jianshun was completely relying on the strength of his Saint Chi. How could he possibly be a match for the old man? However, Jianshun was secretly delighted. This time, when he clashed with the old man, he clearly understood just how big of a gap there was between him and a great Saint Master. This allowed him to calm down quite a bit. On the other hand, the old man's expression became even more serious as he stared at Jianshun and said, "Little child, you aren't simple. It seems that if I want to capture you, old man will have to put in a lot of effort." Jianshun's face revealed a cold smile as he said, "I'm afraid that even if you use all of your strength, you still won't be able to capture me." The old man's eyes flashed with a cold light as he coldly laughed. "Little child, you really know how to talk big. Today, I'll let old man properly deal with you. Let's see just how much ability you have." As soon as he finished speaking, the dagger in the old man's hand suddenly exploded with Saint Chi, completely submerging the dagger. Then, the old man's figure flashed and suddenly appeared in front of Jianshun. The dagger was filled with Saint Chi as it pierced through the air towards Jianshun's heart. Facing a great Saint Master, Jianshun didn't dare to lower his guard in the slightest. He circulated the Saint Chi in his body and gathered it on the light wind sword. With a wave of his right hand, the light wind sword left behind a blurry afterimage as it fiercely collided with the old man's dagger. At that moment, An even stronger shockwave than before exploded outwards, wreaking havoc in all directions. The soil on the ground was sent flying as dust filled the air. The powerful shockwave of the St. Chi caused the surrounding weeds to be torn to shreds. Countless amounts of plant powder were sent flying into the air. After that attack, Jinshin's body once again uncontrollably retreated a few steps. On the other hand, the old man was completely fine as he continued to chase after Jinshin. With a slight sway of his body, the old man quickly arrived in front of Jinshin and once again stabbed his dagger towards Jinshin's heart. Jinshin's body slightly twisted as the dagger brushed past his clothes. Following that, the light wind sword suddenly turned into a blur that enveloped the old man. In that short moment, Jinshin had already stabbed out 10 times at an extremely fast speed. Each strike was accurately aimed at the old man's vitals. The old man pulled back his dagger with lightning-like speed. He swung the dagger so fast that it turned into a blur, blocking Jinshin's attack. Ding, 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 ding. Following the sounds of weapons colliding, the light wind sword and the old man's dagger had already collided more than 10 times in a short period of time. The sound of the weapons colliding was so concentrated that it seemed to have formed a continuous line. Following that, the old man's body was somewhat embarrassed as he retreated. At this moment, the gray robes that he was wearing were no longer as intact as before. There were a few cracks on his chest, but there was no blood flowing out. Behind the old man, there were a few strands of hair that were slowly falling to the ground. If one looked closely, the old man's messy hair was shorter than before. On the other side, Jinshin didn't look much better than the old man. Although he wasn't injured, his face was sickly pale. Looking at the cracks on his robes, the old man's face became gloomy as he said in a low voice, "You don't know how to appreciate kindness. Don't blame me for being ruthless." Jinshin coldly smiled. "There have been many Saint Masters who have died under my sword, but there has never been a great Saint Master who has died under my light wind sword. Today, you will be the first." Chapter 155. Jinshin wasn't afraid in the slightest. Wielding his light wind sword, he charged forward and the two once again engaged in a fierce battle. This time, Jinshin was able to fully utilize his advantage. Using his profound movement technique, he was able to deal with the old man, while using the light wind sword to continuously stab at the old man. Facing the old man's attacks, Jinshin did his best to avoid them. From beginning to end, he did his best to avoid clashing with the old man's saint weapon. Only when he was unable to dodge would he use the light wind sword to block. The dagger in the old man's hand flew up and down under his nimble control. The old man had already reached a level of mastery over the use of a dagger. He was able to use the dagger to perfection, always stabbing out with lightning speed at Jinshin's heart when he wasn't paying attention. The two figures quickly shuttled through the field. The wind brought about by their rapid movements had gradually turned into gusts of wind, blowing the surrounding weeds and powder that had already fallen to the ground in the air once again. Although the two figures were constantly moving back and forth, under Jinshin's deliberate control, their weapons rarely clashed. The more the old man fought, the more depressed he became. In the end, he only felt a stomach full of anger. He was clearly stronger than his opponent, but because his opponent had the advantage in speed and reaction time, he couldn't do anything to his opponent. Moreover, there were many times when, even with his strength as a great Saint Master, he was forced into a state of panic by the frightening speed of the sword, almost to the point where his life was hanging by a thread. "Kid, if you're a man, then fight me to your heart's content. What's the point of fighting like this?" After fighting for a while, the old man finally couldn't hold it in any longer and shouted. Hearing this, Jinshin's face revealed a trace of ridicule and said, "Using one's weakness against another's strength is not a wise choice. Do you think I'm that stupid?" The old man was suddenly at a loss for words. Then he stopped talking. An intense killing intent flashed in his eyes. His hands moved even faster. Every move of his dagger was aimed at Jinshin's vital points. Clearly, he had decided to kill him. Sensing that the old man had no intention of showing any mercy, Jinshin's eyes flashed with a cold light. The speed of his sword suddenly increased, becoming twice as fast as before. The sword shadows that filled the sky overlapped, and it looked like the entire space was filled with countless sword shadows. It was impossible to distinguish between the real and the fake. As Jianshun used his full strength, the pressure the old man faced immediately increased. Although he had the strength of a great Saint Master, and his speed wasn't slow, he still couldn't be compared to Jianshun. Soon, he was forced into a panic by Jianshun. Whoosh! At this moment, within the sword shadows that filled the sky, a sharp sword suddenly appeared. Before the old man could even react, the sharp blade of the sword had already cut through his right wrist. The pain from his wrist caused the old man to be slightly startled. But in the next moment, the light wind sword once again filled the sky with sword shadows and pierced towards the old man. The old man quickly waved his dagger, creating an impenetrable defense in front of him. At the same time, he retreated. However, just as he was about to retreat, the old man's body suddenly stopped. At the same time, a bloody sword pierced through the old man's throat and came out from under his chin. He didn't know when, but Jianshun was already standing behind the old man. The light wind sword had already pierced through the old man's neck, and the other end of the sword pierced through his throat. The old man's eyes were lifeless as he stared at the sword that had pierced through his throat. His eyes were filled with disbelief. At the same time, his mind was filled with questions. He didn't know when Jianshun had appeared behind him, but he didn't even notice. However, the old man didn't have the chance to ask these questions. His body remained in the same position for a while before slowly falling to the ground. His eyes were wide open as he died with remaining grievances. Slowly pulling out the sword, Jianshun let out a long breath. The battle with this great Saint Master had taken a lot of his energy. Now that the battle was over, he couldn't help but feel a bit out of breath. Jianshun withdrew the light wind sword and looked at the old man lying on the ground. He helplessly sighed and muttered, 10 years of cultivation was destroyed in a single day. AI, why did you have to do this? If you hadn't been consumed by greed, how could you have ended up like this? After sighing inwardly, Jianshun took off the old man's spatial belt. After rummaging through it, he took out all of the items that had been inside. The old man's spatial belt didn't have as many monster cores as Jianshun had expected. There were only about 50 of them, but the lowest was a rank 2 monster core. There wasn't a single rank 1 monster core. More than half of them were rank 2 monster cores, and there were about 20 rank 3 monster cores. There was also 1 rank 4 monster core. Other than the monster cores, Jianshun also took out about 70 purple crystal coins from the old man's spatial belt. After storing the monster cores and purple crystal coins into his own space belt, Jianshun rummaged through the old man's space belt again. Suddenly, his face changed, and he took out a piece of white fur from his space belt. This piece of white fur was about the size of a palm and was covered with soft white hair. It was very comfortable to hold in one's hand and even gave off a warm feeling. This piece of fur. Jianshun looked at the piece of white fur in his hand with surprise. He immediately threw away the old man's spatial belt and took out an exquisite spatial ring from his own spatial belt. He then took out a red silk pouch. This red silk pouch was the one that Jianshun's mother, Bai Yintian, had given to him before he left. It was the Bai family's heirloom. Jianshun nimbly opened the silk pouch and took out a piece of white fur. He casually shook it and unfolded it. The piece of fur inside the silk pouch was actually about the size of a palm. Jianshun held the 2 pieces of fur and compared them with each other. The surprise in his eyes grew stronger and stronger. This was because he discovered that not only were the 2 pieces of fur identical in size, but they were also made from the same material. It was as if the 2 pieces of fur were cut from the same piece of fur. Chapter 156. Why would this old man have this kind of fur on him? Could it be that he has some sort of background? Jianshun thought to himself as he pinched a piece of fur in his hand. Perhaps he obtained this pelt by chance. However, what kind of secret is hidden within this pelt? Jianshun lowered his head as he muttered to himself. This piece of fur that he had unintentionally found on the old man's body had once again aroused the curiosity in Jianshun's heart. Could it be a treasure map? Or could it be that there is some sort of incomparably powerful, peerless martial skill recorded on it? Jianshun thought to himself. Based on his experience from his previous life, he quickly deduced a few possibilities. However, this piece of fur was completely white without a single trace of impurities. It did not seem to have much to do with a treasure map or a peerless martial skill. In the past, Jianxin had taken out this piece of fur several times to study it. In his opinion, this piece of fur was extremely flexible, to the point that no matter how hard he tried, he could not pluck a single strand of hair from it. Other than that, it was no different from an ordinary piece of fur. As for what kind of secret was hidden within it, Jianxun had no idea. Forget it. Let's not worry about this for now. I think that sooner or later I will find out the secret of this piece of fur. With this thought in mind, Jianxun placed the piece of fur that belonged to him back into the red silk pouch. Then, he placed it into the space ring along with the fur that he had found on the old man's body. He casually threw the space ring into his space belt. Since he could not figure out what kind of secret was hidden within this piece of fur, Jianxun did not want to waste his brain power and let his imagination run wild. Afterwards, Jianxun once again picked up the old man's space belt and rummaged through it for a while. After confirming that he did not miss out on any valuable treasures, he casually threw the space belt away. Then, he dusted his hands and left the place. Over the next few days, Jianxin continuously searched the magical Beast Mountain range for the people who had tried to capture him, and obtained a large number of magic cores from them. Among these people, those whom Jianxin found pleasing to the eye, he would show some mercy, and those whom he did not find pleasing to the eye, without exception, he would kill without mercy. In the past few days, the number of mercenaries that had died at the hands of Jianxin was innumerable. The mountain range of magical beasts was littered with corpses, and the aura of slaughter permeated the entire mountain range of magical beasts. That bright red blood seemed to have dyed this green ocean red. It had to be said that the 10,000 purple crystal coins from the Tianxiong clan had indeed moved quite a few people. This time, other than a few Saint Masters, there were even a few great Saint Masters who had come to the magical Beast Mountain range. Putting aside the dagger-wielding old man from before, Jianxin had encountered another 4 great Saint Masters in the past few days. 2 of them even belonged to the same organization, and they had brought a total of 30 great saints and Saint Masters to meet with Jianxin. That battle had been extremely bitter, and in the end, Jianxin had spent a tremendous amount of effort to kill the 2 great Saint Masters. As for the other great saints and Saint Masters, quite a few of them had died at Jianxin's hands, and Jianxin had paid the price of being riddled with wounds. In the end, a small portion of people had escaped, and Jianxin was powerless to chase after them. However, Jianxin was able to control the Radiant Saint Force like a Radiant Saint Master, so he was the least afraid of being injured. Therefore, the wounds on his body had completely healed in less than 2 hours. Although the battle had been intense, Jianxin's harvest had also been extremely bountiful. He had obtained over 100 monster cores from the 2 great Saint Masters. Aside from a few monster cores that had reached the 2nd step, the majority were at the 3rd step, and there were also 2 monster cores at the 4th step. Although he had obtained quite a lot from the 2 great Saint Masters, Jianxin had only obtained less than 30 monster cores from the great saints and Saint Masters who had come with the 2 great Saint Masters. Presumably, they belonged to the same mercenary group, so the majority of the monster cores had been gathered on the 2 great Saint Masters. As for the other 2 great Saint Masters, although they didn't have any monster cores at the 4th step, they still had a few monster cores at the 3rd step. However, there weren't many of them. One of them had over 20 monster cores at the 3rd step, and close to 30 monster cores at the 2nd step. As for the other great Saint Master, he seemed extremely shabby. Jianxin had only obtained 5 monster cores at the 3rd step and 1 monster core at the 2nd step from him. As a great Saint Master, his wealth was even less than that of Saint Master. Now that Jianxin had become a Saint Master, his battle prowess had greatly increased. When facing a great Saint Master, he already had the qualifications to kill them. As long as he didn't meet a peak great Saint Master or a great Saint Master who had Saint Force, Jianxin didn't have anything to fear. In the past few days, he had killed several great Saint Masters. Other than the time when he had to deal with two great Saint Masters at the same time, he had to pay the smallest price to kill them. As he continued to kill, Jinshin's name gradually spread. The massacre he had caused in the magical Beast Mountain range was quickly spread by countless mercenaries. Not only did everyone in Wake City know about it, even the surrounding cities knew about Jinshin's name. Some of the mercenaries who had hurried over from afar to participate in the operation to capture Jinshin all gave up on their plans when they heard the rumors that it spread like wildfire. In the magical Beast Mountain range, there were a few mercenaries who grew timid every day. They all retreated from the magical Beast Mountain range, not wanting to participate in this operation. Although quite a few people had left the mountain range of magical beasts, there were still quite a few people who believed that their strength wasn't weak, as well as mercenary groups who continued to stay in the mountain range of magical beasts. After this round of elimination, there weren't many people left in the mountain range of magical beasts, but every single one of them had at least the strength of a saint expert. As a large number of people retreated from the magical Beast Mountain range, the large magical Beast Mountain range became much quieter. Currently, the people who were still in the magical Beast Mountain range all had the intention of capturing Jinshin. As for the mercenaries who had originally been hunting magical beasts in the magical Beast Mountain range, they had also been forced to retreat because of the chaos in the magical Beast Mountain range. Due to the large decrease in the number of people in the magical Beast Mountain range, Jinshin had no choice but to take the initiative. He took the initiative to search for those who were still in the magical Beast Mountain range. As for these people, Jinshin still used the same old method. Those who were willing to hand over their magic cores were all released, and he wouldn't harm a single hair on their heads. As for those who were stubborn and still wanted to capture him, Jinshin directly used an iron fist and killed them all without mercy. In the clear and cloudless sky, a fiery red sun hung high in the sky, emitting a dazzling light that baked the earth, as if the earth had been covered with a layer of golden carpet. In this scorching hot summer, the sun in the sky seemed to be this hot every day. In the magical Beast Mountain range, where trees grew luxuriantly and weeds grew everywhere, it was as if it was a completely different space from the outside world. All around, the tall trees unfurled their luxuriant leaves, completely blocking out the intense sunlight from the outside world. A gentle breeze blew through the forest from time to time, causing some of the weeds and lush branches to sway slowly. The outside world was scorching hot, but in the magical Beast Mountain range, it was cool and refreshing. Somewhere in the magical Beast Mountain range, 10 or so middle-aged men were sitting together in a circle. In the middle of them, a fire was slowly burning, roasting several pieces of magical beast meat on a rack. Drops of fat were squeezed out from the meat, dripping into the fire below, constantly emitting sizzling sounds. Even though these 10 or so middle-aged men were just sitting there was still no way to conceal their tall and sturdy bodies. They were all wearing thin leather armor, and the shiny leather armor was covered with many green stripes that had been carved out by the thorns of the forest. Chapter 157. As soon as this person finished speaking, another person followed up. That's right, Captain. Although we didn't encounter Jinshin, we found at least a few hundred corpses along the way. Many of them died in the same place, and from the looks of it, many of them were acquaintances from Wake City. Almost all of them had the strength of a Saint Master. Since Jinshin was able to kill a team of Saint Masters, then his strength should at least be at the great Saint Master level. Even if we were to face him, we might not be able to capture him. In fact, we might even suffer losses. If the situation is serious, then it's not impossible for us to be completely annihilated. Hearing this, the dozen or so middle-aged men's expressions couldn't help but become even more serious. These thoughts had all appeared in their minds before. They originally thought that with their team of at least mid-level Saint Masters, capturing Jinshin would be an effortless task. After all, such a team would even have the strength to fight against a great Saint Master. Moreover, the information given by the Tianxiong clan clearly stated that Jinshin only had the strength of a great saint. At most, he was a Saint Master, so when they came, they didn't put Jinshin in their eyes. However, as they continued to stay in a magical beast mountain range, the rumors about Jinshin became more and more powerful. Especially recently, there were even rumors that several great Saint Masters had already died at Jinshin's hands. Although they didn't believe such shocking news, as they continued to walk through the mountain range of magical beasts, the corpses they encountered caused their confidence to waver. Right now, they were in an awkward situation where they couldn't back down. They wanted to continue to capture Jinshin, but they were also worried that they wouldn't be a match for Jinshin. They wanted to withdraw from a magical beast mountain range, but they were unwilling. After all, the reward of 10,000 purple crystal coins was too tempting. Leader, let's just give up on this mission. We've been walking for the past few days, and the corpses that we've seen all the time aren't enough to prove one thing. If we really meet Jinshin, even if all of us attack together, we won't be a match for him. If things go wrong, we might all die here. A middle-aged man with a scar on his face said in a deep voice. In his eyes, there was a faint trace of fear. I support Cloud Screen's suggestion. Leader, although 10,000 purple crystal coins is not a small sum, we have to have a reason to spend it. If we throw our lives away here, no matter how much money we have, we will only be able to enjoy the 5 blessings. The one who spoke was a burly man with dark skin. Hearing the words of these people, a middle-aged man with a scar on his face and a resolute expression nodded slightly. Fine. I now announce that everyone is to immediately withdraw from the mountain range of magical beasts. Hearing this, the dozen or so people immediately breathed a sigh of relief, and then the tense expressions on their faces couldn't help but relax. It's too late to leave now. However, before everyone could rejoice for long, a clear voice came from nearby. The sudden voice caused the faces of the dozen or so middle-aged men to change. Who's there? Come out. The middle-aged man with the scar on his face immediately stood up from the ground and shouted sternly. At the same time, the dozen or so middle-aged men also stood up from the ground, and each of them stared fiercely in the direction of the voice. Immediately after, a person wearing bee skin slowly walked out from behind a large tree. This person had a head of long black hair tied behind his back with a straw rope. His face was covered in dirt, and he looked like a little cat. It was impossible to see his face clearly. The dozen or so men's fierce gazes all gathered on the person wearing bee skin. The middle-aged man with the scar on his face shouted in a deep voice, "Who are you?" Hearing this, the person wearing bee skin revealed a trace of a smile. However, this smile was covered by the dark skin of his face, making it seem somewhat sinister. I'm the person you're looking for. Hearing this, the dozen or so men's eyes revealed a trace of confusion. However, they immediately reacted, and their faces all changed greatly. Could it be that you are Jinshin? One of the men shouted hoarsely, his face carrying a trace of panic and disbelief. The person wearing bee skin slowly nodded his head and said with a smile, "That's right. I'm Jinshin." The dozen or so men's faces immediately became interesting. Everyone looked at each other. None of them had expected that the Jinshin they had painstakingly searched for several days would actually appear in front of them just as they were about to leave the magical Beast Mountain range. If this scene had happened a few days ago, the dozen or so men would have surrounded Jinshin excitedly without the slightest hesitation. However, at this moment, for a moment, the dozen or so men felt a wave of bitterness in their hearts. Hand over all the monster cores in your hands, and I can let you leave. If not, then only death awaits you. I'll give you the time it takes to brew a cup of tea to consider. Without waiting for the dozen or so men to speak, Jinshin opened his mouth to speak. Although his tone was calm, in the ears of the dozen or so men, each and every one of their hearts became heavy. The dozen or so men looked at each other, and then the man with the sword scar said in a deep voice, "Sir Jinshin, you want all the monster cores in our possession right from the start. You're really going too far. After all, it was extremely difficult for us to obtain these monster cores. Almost every one of them was obtained by risking our lives against magical beasts." The man with the sword scar's tone was extremely unwilling to accept this. Now that he heard the rumor that Jianshin had already killed several great Saint Masters, the man with the sword scar gave up on the idea of becoming enemies with Jianshin. Jianshin coldly smiled and said, "I don't care about that. The time it takes to brew a cup of tea will be up very soon. If you still don't want to hand over the monster cores, then don't blame me." Hearing these words, the dozen or so men's faces all became ugly. The man with the sword scar hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward and said, "Sir Jianshin, if you can defeat me in 5 moves, we'll hand over the monster cores. Otherwise, we'd rather fight to the death than compromise." Jianshin's calm eyes flashed with a sharp light. Carefully sizing up the man with the sword scar, he said, "All right, I'll defeat you in 5 moves." Finished speaking, powerful Saint force surged out of his right hand, quickly condensing into a 4-foot-long and 2 fingers wide sword. Chapter 158. Seeing that Jianshin and the captain were about to fight, the 10 large men retreated far away while staring at Jianshin and the knife-scarred man. The knife-scarred man gripped his greatsword tightly as he stared at Jianshin with a dignified expression on his face. Whether or not they would be able to keep their monster cores would depend on this battle. Although it was impossible for a great Saint Master to defeat a high-level Saint Master within 5 moves, the knife-scarred man saw that Jianshin had agreed so easily. Therefore, even if he only needed to last 5 moves against Jianshin, it would still be quite a bit of pressure for the middle-aged man. Moreover, he was worried that Jianshin would agree so easily because he wanted to use this opportunity to get rid of him and reduce the strength of the other party. Although he had such thoughts, he didn't dare to do anything. He still wanted to try and keep his monster cores. At the same time, the knife-scar man also wanted to see Jianshin's strength. He wanted to see just how strong such a young person was. He wanted to see if he was really as strong as the rumors said. He wanted to see if he was able to kill a great Saint Master at the age of 20. Seeing the knife-scarred man's dignified expression, Jianshin faintly smiled and extended his hand. "Please." The knife-scarred man didn't hold back and released a powerful burst of Saint Chi from his greatsword as he rushed towards Jianshin with light steps. Jianshin's body turned into a blur as he rushed towards the knife-scarred man. The light wind sword in his hand emitted a sharp sword chi as it pierced towards the knife-scarred man like a bolt of lightning. Seeing Jianshin's lightning-fast sword, the knife-scarred man's pupils shrank. He immediately swung his greatsword down towards Jianshin's light wind sword. Ding! Following the crisp sound of metal clashing, the 2 weapons that were completely different in size collided violently in midair. A powerful shockwave burst out, turning into a gust of wind that wreaked havoc in all directions. As soon as the 2 weapons collided, the middle-aged man's expression changed slightly, and a trace of shock flashed in his eyes. From this small, long sword that was only 2 fingers wide suddenly came a powerful force that was completely incompatible with its physical strength, and it shook his hands that were holding the huge sword, causing them to feel numb. Just by wielding a sword in one hand, he is able to fight me to a standstill. It seems the rumors are true. The scarred man was secretly shocked. However, just as this thought appeared in the scarred man's mind, Jianshin's second sword strike came over, and the speed was even faster than before. The scarred man's expression was incomparably dignified. Jianshin's sword was so fast that it didn't give him any time to prepare. Enduring the numbness in his arms, he raised his greatsword in front of him to block Jianshin's light wind sword. When the light wind sword came into contact with the scarred man's greatsword, an even more terrifying force than before passed through the man's body. The scarred man couldn't help but stagger backwards, and the 2 hands that were holding onto the greatsword couldn't help but tremble twice. "You've already lost." Just as the scarred man stabilized himself, a faint voice came from the front. When the middle-aged man reacted, his face immediately became pale, without a trace of blood, and his forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat. In front of him, there was a long sword that was flickering with a biting cold light. He didn't know when it had come to a stop in front of him, but the tip of the sword was just about to touch his throat. The scarred man's face was sluggish as he stared at the sword in front of his throat in disbelief. For a moment, He was actually speechless. Such a scene caused the dozen or so large men standing behind the scarred man to be filled with disbelief. Their gazes were all dull as they blankly stared at the long sword that gently touched the scarred man's throat. They were so shocked that they were speechless. "This is the third move you've lost." Putting away the light wind sword, Jianshin calmly looked at the scarred man in front of him. 3 moves. Jianshin only used 3 moves to defeat a high-level Saint Master. The scarred man quickly came back to his senses as he looked at Jianshan with a bit of fear. Taking a deep breath, he said with a trembling voice, What a fast sword." A faint smile appeared on Jianshin's face as he said, "Now you should know what to do." The scarred man quickly calmed down and looked deeply at Jianshin. Although Jianshin's face was covered in dirt and he couldn't see his appearance, he could still see that Jianshin's face was young. The scarred man put away his sword and cupped his hands towards Jianshin. "Many thanks for your mercy." The scarred man then turned around to look at the large man behind him and sighed inwardly. He helplessly said, "Everyone, take out all the monster cores you have." Upon hearing this, the dozen or so burly men hesitated for a moment before reluctantly taking out all of the demonic cores from their spatial belts and placing them on the ground one by one. After watching the battle between Jianshin and the scarred man, they knew that Jianshin only wanted their monster cores and not their lives. Otherwise, with the strength that Jianshin had just displayed, even if all of them attacked together, they would still be wiped out. This was because even the strongest leader of their group couldn't last more than 5 moves against Jianshin, let alone them. The scarred man took out a pouch from his spatial belt and put his monster cores in it first. Afterwards, without Jianshin's orders, he took the initiative to put all the monster cores in the pouch. Finally, he handed the pouch to Jianshin. He looked at the pouch with some reluctance and said softly, "All the monster cores we have are here." There were at least 100 monster cores in the pouch. Half of them were Class 3 monster cores, while the rest were Class 2 monster cores. There were only a few Class 1 monster cores. Jianshin accepted the pouch and directly tossed it into his spatial belt. He said, "I, Jianshin, am a man of my word. You can all leave." Afterwards, the scarred man didn't say anything else and left with the group in low spirits. Looking in the direction that they had left, Jianshin let out a long breath. He lazily leaned against a large tree behind him and muttered, "These past few days have been quite tiring. However, although it's been quite tiring, the harvest has been quite bountiful. The monster cores I've collected these past few days should be enough for me to cultivate for a long time. I don't even know if I should thank the Tianxiong clan or hate them." Chapter 159. After that, Jianshin found a river according to his memory and washed off the dirt on his body. He then took out a new set of clothes from his space belt and put them on. After wearing the simple coat made of animal hide for a long time, a comfortable feeling spread throughout Jian Wushuang's body as soon as he put on the soft cotton clothes. Jianshin stretched his body a little intoxicated as he felt the warmth from the cotton clothes on his body. At this moment, his nerves that had been tense for the past few days finally relaxed. After that, Jianshin casually slaughtered a magical beast in the forest and tore off a large and fat hind leg. He found a dry place and started a fire to slowly roast it. After satisfying his hunger, Jianshin also started to count his gains from the past few days. When Jianshin took out all the magical cores from his space belt, they had already piled up into a small hill that was more than a meter high on the ground. With so many magical cores gathered together, the surging energy hidden within seemed to have produced traces of resonance. Just the slight aura that was emitted made Jianshin's heart palpitate. Roughly speaking, there were no less than 2,000 magical cores in this pile of magical cores. As for the specific number, if one did not count carefully, it would be impossible to guess an accurate number. After all, the size of each magical core was different. Looking at so many magical cores, Jianshin could not help but reveal an excited smile on his face. The bountiful harvest of the past few days was simply unimaginable. With so many magical cores, it would be enough for him to cultivate for a long time in the future. Feeling excited, Jianshin took out 3 space belts and casually threw them to the side. These space belts were specially taken from the mercenaries by Jianshun in case of an emergency. After that, Jianshun started to classify the magical cores one by one. About 4 hours later, Jianshun finally finished sorting through the large pile of monster cores. There were 3 piles of monster cores in front of him. One pile was all monster cores of the first rank, another pile was all monster cores of the second rank, and the last pile was all monster cores of the third rank. There are a total of over 700 rank 1 magical cores, over 900 rank 2 magical cores, and over 600 rank 3 magical cores. I didn't think that I would actually obtain 2,300 magical cores in the past few days. Hehe, this is really unexpected. Tianxiong clan, it seems that I have to properly thank you for creating such a good opportunity for me. Looking at so many magical cores, Jianxin cheerfully muttered to himself. Afterwards, Jianxin placed the magical cores in the 3 space belts. Afterwards, he returned to the cave he had stayed in for a few days. After covering up the cave entrance, he continued to cultivate. In the pitch-black cave, Jianxin sat cross-legged on the ground like a statue without moving. If it were not for the faint sound of his breathing, perhaps people would really think that he was a living statue. As the energy within the magical cores was continuously absorbed by Jianxin, the saint force in his body was constantly growing stronger. After becoming a saint master, not only did Jianxin require an even greater amount of energy for his cultivation, even the speed at which he absorbed energy had doubled. When he was still a great saint, he would need to consume 3 magical cores in a single night of cultivation. If he cultivated continuously for an entire day, he would need to consume about 10 magical cores. But now, as the speed at which he absorbed energy increased, Jianxin's requirement for a single night of cultivation had increased to 6 or 7 magical cores. In this way, he would need to consume about 20 magical cores in an entire day. Although the consumption of class 3 magical cores was still extremely terrifying, Jianxin was no longer worried about not having enough magical cores. This was because not only did he have several hundred class 3 magical cores in his space belt, but he was also in the magical Beast Mountain range. He could now enter the deeper parts of the mountain range to hunt class 4 magical beasts at any time. The energy contained within class 4 magical cores was far more powerful than class 3 magical cores. In the outside world, Jianxin's name and everything he had done in the magical Beast Mountain range had already spread like wildfire. In the magical Beast Mountain range, Jianxin was currently sitting cross-legged in a pitch-black cave, working hard to increase his strength. Time quickly passed, and in the blink of an eye, a year had already passed. In this year, the storm that Jianxin had caused in the outside world had gradually calmed down. Wake City had already returned to its former state. Compared to a year ago, there weren't many changes. The only difference was that the Tianxiong clan that had once ruled over Wake City had completely declined. In the depths of the magical Beast Mountain range, there were very few signs of human habitation. An area where class 4 magical beasts roamed wasn't a place that just anyone could enter. In this area, it was very normal to not see a single person for 10 days to half a month. At this moment, a green smoke was slowly rising from the forest not far away, following which the fragrance of barbecued meat drifted in all directions under the gentle breeze. A young man wearing plain clothes was sitting cross-legged on the ground. In front of him, a fire was burning fiercely, roasting a piece of magical beast meat on a rack. This young man looked to be in his early 20s. His long hair was tied into a braid by a straw rope, casually falling behind his back. The young man was very handsome, and his exquisite facial features were flawless. In addition to his fair and tender face that seemed to be smeared with rouge, coupled with a pair of eyes that seemed to be filled with a strange charm, he was simply the killer of all the young girls in the world. This young man was precisely Jianxin. In this year, Jianxin had always stayed in the magical Beast Mountain range and had never left. A year ago, Jianxin had already used up all the class 3 magical beast cores he had obtained from the mercenaries. Only the class 1 and class 2 magical beast cores remained. In this year, ever since he had used up all the Class 3 magical beast cores, Jinshin had started to use Class 4 magical beast cores to cultivate. Once he had used up all the Class 4 magical beast cores in his bag, he would head into the depths of the magical beast mountain range to hunt for Class 4 magical beast cores. Once he had a harvest, he would return to the cave and continue cultivating. In this way, after a year of cultivation, Jinshin's strength had already risen from the initial stage of the Saint Master level to the high stage of the Saint Master level. Now, hunting Class 4 magical beasts was no longer difficult for Jinshin. It's been a year. Time really flies. It seems I should go out for a walk and stabilize my current strength. Alas, using magical beast cores to cultivate, even though the berserk elements have been removed, there's still some after effects. Sitting in front of the fire, Jinshin murmured in a low voice. After filling his stomach, Jinshin extinguished the fire and continued to head into the depths of the magical beast mountain range. Since he planned to leave this place, Jinshin had to prepare a few more Class 4 magical beast cores in preparation for his future cultivation. The area where Class 4 magical beasts roamed was already close to the center of the magical beast mountain range. Compared to the outside, this place was much quieter. This was because Class 4 magical beasts were not as common as Class 1 and 2 magical beast cores. In this place, wanting to encounter a Class 4 magical beast was an extremely difficult matter. However, Class 3 magical beasts were still relatively common. Roar. Chapter 160. The sudden heaven-shaking roar caused Jinshin's expression to instantly become serious. His eyes glinted as he stared ahead, thinking to himself, just a single roar is already so powerful. This is at least a peak 4th rank magical beast. Just as this thought flashed through Jinshin's mind, suddenly, a terrifyingly powerful energy fluctuation came from several kilometers away. The surging energy fluctuation transformed into a visible ripple that swept through the heavens and earth, rapidly spreading towards the distance. It wreaked havoc along the way, uprooting one ancient tree after another and sending it flying high into the sky from the surging energy fluctuation. Standing several kilometers away, Jinshin's expression became incomparably serious. His gaze was somewhat shocked as he looked at the surging energy that was rapidly approaching. After being stunned for a moment, he couldn't help but cry out in alarm. Looking at its might, it should be at least a 5th rank magical beast. The energy ripple spread at an extremely fast speed, spreading to several kilometers away in front of Jinshin very quickly. At this time, the powerful energy had already weakened by a lot. In the end, it transformed into a gust of wind that whistled past Jinshin, causing Jinshin's clothes to flutter rapidly. Even the long black hair that was tied up into a whip behind him was blown away by the wind. The roars of magical beasts in front of him continuously sounded, accompanied by loud, rumbling sounds. Powerful energy fluctuations constantly wreaked havoc in front of him, causing the entire mountain forest to shake. Jinshin's expression was somewhat serious as he stared ahead. When he heard 2 completely different roars of magical beasts, his eyes couldn't help but reveal a trace of surprise. He muttered in a low voice, "From the looks of it, there seems to be 2 5th rank magical beasts fighting over there." Jinshin hesitated for a moment, before immediately using his movement technique to quickly rush forward. Jinshin rushed through the gust of wind that was completely formed from the energy fluctuations. He quickly crossed several kilometers and hid far away to observe the scene in front of him. Around 500 meters away, 2 magical beasts of completely different sizes were fighting intensely. As they collided again and again, powerful energy fluctuations erupted in all directions. At the place where they fought, the ground had already become full of potholes. Several meters deep craters had appeared in the surroundings. The originally lush trees had also been uprooted by the powerful energy fluctuations from the battle, flying far away. Some of the more fragile weeds had been immediately destroyed into powder. The entire place was a mess. Jinshin carefully hid 500 meters away. In order to avoid being discovered by the 2 magical beasts fighting intensely, he stuck his entire body close to the ground. His eyes were fixated on the two magical beasts fighting in front of him. Although the two magical beasts were moving quickly, Jianshun was still able to clearly see their appearances with his eyesight. Of the two magical beasts fighting, one of them was pitch black and the size of a cow. It had 2 legs on its head, but on its back was a pair of short black wings. On the other hand, there was a snow-white petite magic beast the size of a yellow dog. Although the two magic beasts differed greatly in size, they were on par with each other in terms of strength. Roar! Roar! Furious roars constantly rang out from the two magical beasts. As they spat out balls of energy filled with surging energy, they collided in midair and erupted with deafening booms. The surging energy fluctuations wreaked havoc in the surroundings, causing the world to pale in comparison. Is this the true strength of a 5th-rank magical beast? Jianshun's gaze was somewhat aghast as he stared at the two magical beasts fighting in front of him. His entire body was tightly crouched on the ground. He didn't even dare to move, fearing that he would attract the attention of the two magical beasts and bring disaster upon himself. Although Jianshun's current strength had already reached the level of high-rank Saint Master, and he didn't fear a 4th-rank magical beast, after witnessing the powerful might displayed by the two 5th-rank magical beasts, he didn't have much confidence in being able to escape from the pursuit of the 5th-rank magical beasts. Although the difference between the 5th rank and the 4th rank was only 1 rank, the gap between them was like heaven and earth. The two couldn't be compared at all. The two magical beasts of completely different sizes fought for half a day before the intense sounds of battle gradually stopped. At this moment, the two magical beasts were riddled with scars from head to toe. They were currently lying on the ground powerlessly. Their stomachs were violently rising and falling, and their mouths were emitting hurried, breathing sounds. Jianshun had a panoramic view of the scene in front of him. Seeing the miserable state of the two magical beasts, Jianshun's mind was moved. From the looks of it, the two magical beasts seem to have already fought to the point where both sides are injured. They don't even have the strength to stand up. They should be extremely weak. A bold thought suddenly appeared in Jianshun's mind. When this thought had just appeared in his mind, all of the blood in Jianshun's body seemed to be boiling at this moment. Even his heart began to beat uncontrollably. Jianshun quietly crouched on the ground. The light in his eyes flickered incessantly. His expression was full of hesitation. After hesitating for a moment, he finally made his decision. He clenched his teeth and no longer concealed his figure. He directly stood up from the ground and used his movement technique to quickly charge towards the two magical beasts. Roar! The two magical beasts simultaneously discovered the rapidly approaching Jianshun. They couldn't help but let out a low roar. Their eyes flashed with an ominous light as they stared fiercely at Jianshun. However, they didn't take any action. When Jianshun was only 100 meters away from the two magical beasts, he suddenly stopped. At this moment, his face had already become incomparably dignified. Although he was facing two severely injured magical beasts, Jianshun didn't dare to relax in the slightest. Jianshun slowed down his footsteps. His face was full of vigilance as he approached the two magical beasts step by step. The silver-white light wind sword quietly appeared in his right hand. The sword was only 2 fingers wide, but a hazy light was constantly being emitted from it. Roar! Magical beasts of the 5th rank already had a certain amount of intelligence. The two magical beasts seemed to have understood Jianshun's intentions. At the same time, they let out a threatening roar towards Jianshun, as if warning Jianshun not to come closer. Chapter 161. Seeing Jianshun continuously approaching, the panic in the eyes of the two 5th-rank magical beasts lying on the ground became even more obvious. If they were in their peak condition, they naturally wouldn't put Jianshun in their eyes. However, the situation at that time was different. In the previous fierce battle, not only were both of them injured, they couldn't even stand up. Moreover, the energy in their body was almost exhausted. With their current state, let alone as Saint Master, perhaps even a great saint would be able to kill them as long as he attacked their wounds. The two magical beast bodies violently struggled a few times, as if they wanted to stand up. However, after some effort, they were still unable to do this action that couldn't be any simpler for them. Seeing this scene, Jinshin's heart that was in his throat immediately relaxed a little. However, he still maintained a high degree of vigilance and wouldn't be careless in the slightest because of this. With a face full of vigilance, Jinshin walked step by step towards the two magical beasts. Soon, he arrived only 30 meters away from the two magical beasts. Facing two seriously injured 5th-rank magical beasts, Jinshin was still cautious, as if he was facing a great enemy. Roar! Just at this time, the snow-white magical beast with a petite body like a puppy let out a deep roar. Powerful energy quickly gathered in its mouth, forming a ball of energy light that was completely compressed into a ball of energy in its mouth. Its pair of small eyes stared at Jinshin with a sense of warning. The other magical beast with a body like a cow also stared at Jinshin tightly. The pair of short wings that grew on its back also faintly emitted strong energy fluctuations. Jinshin's advancing steps came to an abrupt stop. He stood in place and stared at the two seriously injured 5th-rank magical beasts with a somewhat dignified expression. Jinshin didn't approach. The energy that the two magical beasts had gathered also didn't release. Jinshin slightly hesitated for a moment. Although the two magical beasts in front of him were seriously injured, they brought a very powerful pressure to Jinshin. Faintly, from the two seriously injured magical beasts, Jinshin felt a trace of extremely dangerous aura. Just as the two of them were nervously staring at each other, suddenly, Jinshin's body slightly swayed. After leaving behind an afterimage, he had already rushed towards the snow-white, petite magical beast with an extremely fast speed. At this moment, Jinshin had already burst forth with all of his strength, increasing his speed to the limit. The short distance of 30 meters was like nothing to Jinshin with all of his strength. In the blink of an eye, he had already crossed it. When Jinshin got close to the petite magical beast, his movements didn't stop at all. His right arm suddenly shook, and the silver-white light wind sword turned into a flash of lightning, bringing with it a swift and fierce sword chi as it pierced towards the magical beast's neck. Roar! The petite magical beast's reaction wasn't any slower than Jinshin's. Almost as soon as Jinshin arrived in front of it, it spat out the ball of energy in its mouth and shot towards Jinshin's chest at an extremely fast speed. At this moment, Jinshin suddenly withdrew his light wind sword and immediately retreated. At the same time, he tried to twist his body to the side in an attempt to avoid the incoming ball of energy. Unfortunately, the ball of energy was too fast. Even though Jinshin tried his best to dodge, he still wasn't able to completely avoid it. The ball of energy that was originally heading towards Jinshin's chest, because of the slight deviation of his body, ended up smashing into Jinshin's left shoulder. Boom! Although the ball of energy was only the size of a child's fist, it contained a terrifying amount of energy. When the ball of energy smashed into Jinshin's left shoulder, Jinshin's entire body was sent flying far away. Jinshin flew for more than 10 meters before crashing to the ground. Along the way, he rolled a few meters before finally coming to a stop. At this moment, his face was incomparably pale, and the pain from his left shoulder was so intense that his handsome face was completely distorted. The muscles on his face were constantly twitching. The clothes on Jinshin's upper body had been torn to shreds by the powerful energy. At this moment, his upper body was practically naked, and the area around his shoulder had become a bloody mess. The deep white bone was already visible, and bright red blood was continuously flowing out from the wound. Jinshin endured the pain from his left shoulder and endured the torment from his nerves. He forced himself to stand up from the ground, his eyes filled with ruthlessness as he stared at the petite magic beast in front of him. After the attack, the petite magic beast's complexion had also withered. Even the light in its eyes had dimmed. It seemed that the attack from before had used up all of its energy. Its current state was even weaker than before. Although his left shoulder had suffered a great injury, it didn't affect Jinshin's mobility much. Jinshin's body slightly swayed, and he quickly arrived behind the petite magic beast. The light wind sword in his hand carried a powerful sword chi as it pierced forward. Clang! Just as the light wind sword was about to pierce forward, a white shadow quickly flashed and fiercely slapped the light wind sword to the side, causing the light wind sword to miss. Immediately after, Jinshin saw the white shadow flash by, and before he could see what it was, his chest suffered another heavy blow. Thump, thump, thump. The strong impact caused Jinshin to stagger back a few steps. Feeling a burning sensation in his chest, Jinshin lowered his head and saw that his chest had become red. There was a faint trace of blood coming out from his pores. Forcefully swallowing the blood in his throat, Jinshin stared at the dying class 5 magical beast on the ground. He saw that the magic beast's long tail was waving weakly behind it. Just a moment ago, Jinshin had been attacked by this petite magic beast tail. Umph. I don't believe that I can't deal with a heavily injured class 5 magical beast. Today, I will take your magic core. Jinshin gritted his teeth, and the light wind sword's sharp sword chi sword. With a wave of his sword, the sword chi left the sword and shot towards the class 5 magical beast. Facing the sword chi, the petite class 5 magical beast had no way of dodging and could only take it head-on. Several streaks of sword energy accurately landed on the hideous wounds on its body, causing its entire body to tremble violently. Jinshin didn't hesitate in the slightest. His body flashed, and once again appeared in front of the magical beast, and the light wind sword pierced towards its throat. Pooh! This time, the petite magic beast seemed to have used up all of its strength. It was so exhausted that it couldn't even wave its tail. Chapter 162. Seeing that he had finally killed this heavily injured magical beast of the 5th step, Jinshin immediately let out a sigh of relief. The strength of a magical beast of the 5th step was indeed very powerful. Even a peak magical beast of the 4th step was probably as insignificant as an ant in their eyes. Just dealing with a magical beast of the 5th step that was so heavily injured that it didn't even have the strength to stand up. Jinshin had still suffered such a huge injury, even when he had used all his strength. Just as Jinshin let out a sigh of relief, suddenly, a powerful energy fluctuation came from the front. Jinshin's face changed slightly. When he suddenly raised his head, he saw a meter-long, crescent-shaped wind blade shot out from the short wings on the back of another magical beast. It flew towards him at an extremely fast speed. Within the crescent-shaped wind blade, there was a powerful energy fluctuation that made Jinshin's expression change. Jinshin's face suddenly changed. Without any hesitation, he immediately did a lazy roll, narrowly dodging the attack. The crescent-shaped wind blade brushed past Jinshin's scalp, and his black hair fluttered in the wind. Afterwards, the crescent-shaped wind blade did not stop, flying towards the distance at an extremely fast speed. All obstructions along the way were mercilessly destroyed. In the end, after flying for several hundred meters, it finally hit the ground. The powerful energy contained within it exploded, directly causing the ground to be filled with smoke and dust. The violent movements of his body affected the wound on his left shoulder, especially when the wound on his left shoulder was in close contact with the ground. The heart-piercing pain came wave after wave, simply tormenting Jinshin's brain. The muscles on Jinshin's face constantly twitched. He clenched his teeth and endured the intense pain from his left shoulder, immediately standing up from the ground. There was still a magical beast of the 5th step glaring at him from the side. There was no time for Jinshin to treat his wounds. At this moment, the bull-like, black-furred magical beast began to gather energy again. A layer of hazy black light radiated from the wings on its back, and the waves of energy rapidly grew from weak to strong. However, as the energy from the wings grew stronger, the light in the magical beast's eyes grew dimmer. In the end, it seemed like it was extremely difficult for it to even keep its eyes open. Glancing at the short wings on the back of the magical beast, Jinshin felt the powerful energy fluctuations contained within them. His face became serious as he slightly retreated. Even his body was prepared to dodge at any time. Roar! The magical beast let out a weak roar towards Jianshun, as if warning Jianshin not to move forward. From its eyes, one could clearly see that it was in a very weak state. The energy that it had gathered in its wings was also drawn but not released. This was already its last chance to save its life. Gathering this much energy had already exhausted all of its energy. Once this attack was released, it would become a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Jianshun slowly retreated. His eyes were sharp as he stared at the magical beast with vigilance. At this moment, Jianshin suddenly threw the light wind sword in his hand towards the magical beast. The light wind sword was thrown very high up into the air, spinning in the air as it flew towards the magical beast's back. However, just as Jianshin was about to make his move, the wings on the back of the magical beast gently trembled. Immediately after, a crescent-shaped energy shot towards Jianshin at an extremely fast speed. Jianshin seemed to have anticipated this attack. Just as the crescent-shaped energy shot out, Jianshin once again did a lazy roll. Using his left shoulder to avoid contact with the ground, he quickly moved a few meters away, narrowly dodging the attack. After launching that attack, the magical beast seemed to have suddenly lost all its strength. Its originally ferocious eyes also became a little dull and lifeless, and its eyes were full of fatigue. At this moment, the light wind sword that was still in midair suddenly trembled violently. Immediately after, an even stronger and sharper sword chi appeared and enveloped the light wind sword in a hazy silver light. Bathed in the silver light, the light wind sword's thin blade was faintly discernible. Looking at it, it added a mysterious feeling to it. Immediately after, the light wind sword turned into a silver light, and with a piercing sound, it shot towards the magical beast that was lying on the ground. Kacha! Following the sound of two hard objects colliding, the sharp tip of the light wind sword had already pierced through the magical beast's skull. Roar! The magical beast let out a mournful cry. The sound was extremely loud, shaking the heavens and earth, causing Jianshin's ears to go blind for a moment. The deafening cry quickly weakened, and when it finally disappeared, the life in the magical beast's eyes was quickly fading away. Soon after, the magical beast's eyes were completely empty. Finally, the magical beast's eyes closed. Jianshan struggled to crawl up from the ground. His body was slightly swaying as he stared at the magical beast that had its head pierced through by the light wind sword. His face couldn't help but reveal a trace of a victorious smile. It's finally dead. Magical beasts of the 5th rank are really strong. I didn't think that it would be so difficult to deal with two heavily injured magical beasts. It seems that the Golden Tiger King that I met last time didn't show its full strength. Jianshin muttered weakly. Soon after, Jianshin walked over to the magical beast that was the size of a cow and pulled out the light wind sword. He then sat down cross-legged, and a thick milky white light began to gather around Jianshin's body. He wasn't in a hurry to deal with the corpses of the two magical beasts because in his current state, he didn't have the strength to do so. Moreover, he still had to be on guard against any other magical beasts that might appear at any time. Thus, the most important thing right now was to heal his injuries. Ever since Jianshin's strength had broken through to the Saint Master level, his soul had also grown. Right now, the amount of holy force he could control was a lot thicker than before, and the amount of time he could maintain it had also increased. This time, Jianshin's left shoulder was too heavily injured. Even his flesh had been blown away by the intense energy, so even with the holy force, it would still take some time to heal. After about 2 hours, the milky white light around Jianshin's body finally dissipated, revealing Jianshin's figure. At this moment, Jianshin's face was a bit haggard. Although his soul had grown a bit, after maintaining the holy force for 4 hours, he still felt a bit tired. At the very least, he didn't immediately fall into a drowsy state like before. Chapter 163. Sitting cross-legged on the ground, Jianshin slowly opened his eyes. Turning his head, he saw that the wound on his right shoulder had completely healed. Reaching out his right hand, he gently stroked the new flesh that had regrown. Feeling the strange sensation of touching his skin, Jianshun couldn't help but sigh at the miraculous nature of Saint Force. Jianshun tore off the tattered clothes on his body, revealing his body that was still stained with blood. Using the torn clothes, he casually wiped the blood off his body. Slowly standing up from the ground, Jianshun's gaze swept over the two Class 5 magical beast corpses. Muttering to himself, he said, "From the looks of it, this snow-white magical beast should be called a swift cloud beast." According to the records, the swift cloud beast body is small and agile. Its white fur is like the clouds in the sky. As for the other magical beast with wings on its back, it should be the sky-winged demonic bull. The wings on its back can only be used to attack, but they can allow it to fly. Very quickly, Jianshun found information about the two magical beasts from the books he had read at Kargath Institute. The sky-winged demonic bull's magic core is hidden under its wings, while the swift cloud beast's magic core is hidden in its brain. The light wind sword once again appeared in Jianshun's hand. Jianshun held the light wind sword in his hand as he walked over to the swift cloud beast and stabbed towards its head. After expending a bit of effort to extract the magic core from the swift cloud beast's brain, the swift cloud beast's head, that was once the size of a dog, had completely changed in appearance. Although the swift cloud beast was a Class 5 magical beast, due to the natural limitations of their species, they could not exceed 2 meters in size unless they were Class 6 magical beasts. Due to the limitations of their bodies, even their magic cores were relatively small, only about the size of a walnut. After taking out the swift cloud beast's monster core, Jianshun once again walked in front of the sky-winged demonic bull. Using his light wind sword, he pierced through the gap between the two wings on its back. After a bit of effort, he was finally able to extract the monster core. The sky-winged demonic bull's monster core was about the size of an adult's fist. Jianshun used a piece of cloth to wipe away the bloodstains on the two magic cores, revealing two sparkling and translucent energy crystals. Jianshun was inwardly shocked when he sensed the surging and pure energy hidden within the crystal. It was no wonder the difference between a Class 4 and Class 5 magical beast was so great. At this moment, he could clearly feel that the energy contained within a Class 5 magical beast was a qualitative leap from a Class 4 magical beast to a Class 5 magical beast. The two were simply incomparable. Furthermore, although the sizes of the two Class 5 monster cores were different, the energy contained within them was almost the same. Just these two Class 5 monster cores should be able to sustain my cultivation for a long time. Tightly holding onto the Class 5 monster cores that were still a bit warm, Jianshun muttered excitedly. His heart was filled with an intense joy. After his excitement lasted for a while, Jianshun quickly calmed down. Taking out an extra spatial belt, he placed the two Class 5 magical beast corpses inside. The corpses of Class 5 magical beasts were not cheap. Jianshun could not throw them away like he did with Class 3 and Class 4 magical beasts. Just these two corpses could be sold for a lot of money. Furthermore, the corpses of magical beasts above Class 5 were practically priceless. This was because eating the flesh and blood of high-class magical beasts was extremely beneficial to the human body. It could even slightly increase one's strength and strengthen one's body. Of the two Class 5 magical beast corpses, the largest one, the celestial winged magic ox, was only 4 meters long. The smallest one, the quick cloud beast, was less than a meter long. Therefore, the spatial belt that Jianshun took out was just enough to fit the two magical beasts. After cleaning up the corpses of the two magical beasts, Jianshun took out a new set of clothes from his spatial belt. Although he hadn't gone out for a long time, he still had quite a few clothes from the mercenaries he had looted in the past. Jianshun didn't stay for long and left as soon as he finished dealing with the items. Although the battle between the two Class 5 magical beasts had scared off a few of the Class 4 magical beasts in the surroundings, no one could say for sure if there were any more Class 5 magical beasts nearby that would come running over. If another Class 5 magical beast appeared, then Jianshun would not be its opponent. With his current strength as a high-level Saint Master, he did not have absolute confidence that he would be able to escape from a Class 5 magical beast. Only if he met a Class 5 magical beast that was extremely slow would he have any hope of escaping. In the blink of an eye, another half a month had passed. Somewhere in the depths of the magical Beast Mountain range, Jinshin slowly pulled out the light wind sword that had pierced through the cyan python's heart. He then took out the monster core from its body and casually grabbed a handful of grass from the ground to wipe the blood off the monster core. I've harvested several dozen Class 4 monster cores in the past half a month. Moreover, using monster cores for long periods of time will leave behind some hidden dangers. It's best if I don't increase my strength as much as possible during this period of time and focus on removing the hidden dangers in my body. Otherwise, it'll probably have an even greater impact in the future. Since that's the case, I should leave this place and observe the situation outside. Jinshin muttered to himself as he wiped the fist-sized Class 4 monster core in his hand. Moreover, I still have to carry out Uncle Kendall's wishes. I have to find Uncle Kendall's family as soon as possible. Jinshin left the mountain range of magical beasts. After 2 days of trekking through dense forests and slaying countless magical beasts and wild beasts that came to harass him, he finally arrived at a large plain. Jinshin did not return to Wake City. Tianxiong Lai of the Tianxiong clan was a mid-level Saint Master with Earth Saint Force. He had an innate advantage in terms of defense and was specialized in countering Jinshin's swift sword attacks. Moreover, his strength was many times stronger than the average high-level Saint Master. Therefore, Jinshin did not want to return unless he was certain that he could kill him. Moreover, the Tianxiong clan had been the #1 clan in Wake City for more than 10 years. Although they had lost a lot of people in the magical Beast Mountain range, Jinshin didn't believe that the Tianxiong clan didn't have any connections. If he returned to Wake City now, he wouldn't just have to deal with one great Saint Master, but several great Saint Masters and dozens of Saint Masters. Before he became a great Saint Master, Jinshin did not want to be surrounded by a group of great Saint Masters. Furthermore, Jinshin did not have any clues about Uncle Kendall's family. Even if he wanted to find them, he would have to start from Wake City. Before he completely destroyed the Tianxiong clan, Jinshin did not want to leak any information about Uncle Kendall's family. This was because he did not want to see the Tianxiong clan use Uncle Kendall's family to threaten him. Jinshin blindly walked in a straight line in this half-meter deep grassland. Although he had checked the map of the area within 1,000 kilometers of Wake City, his current location was far beyond that. As a result, Jinshin had no idea where he was. The only thing he could do was follow the direction of the sun in the sky and continue to walk in a certain direction. Chapter 164. At this moment, Jinshin's eyes flashed and he stopped in his tracks. In front of him, there was a small but concentrated movement that entered Jinshin's ears. Jinshin's eyes flashed as he stared at the grassland in front of him. His ears twitched as he tried to catch the small but concentrated movement in front of him. Immediately, Jinshin's face revealed a disdainful sneer as he continued to walk forward as if nothing had happened. After a few breaths of time, the concentrated movement entered Jinshin's ears. The movement was so loud that he didn't even need to pay attention to hear it clearly. In front of him was a patch of grass that was half the height of a person. It was as if it was being blown by a gentle breeze. Following the movement of the grass, there were countless green shadows that flashed through the grass. Jinshin's expression was calm as he continued to walk forward. In his right hand, a large amount of Saint Chi flowed out and quickly condensed into a silver-white long sword. At this moment, a low howl of a wolf could be heard. Immediately after, a green shadow leapt out from the grass and pounced towards Jinshin. Jinshin didn't look sideways. Just as the green shadow was about to reach him, his right arm slightly trembled as the light wind sword his right hand transformed into a silver-white light. At the same time, he took a big step forward and dodged the green shadow that was pouncing towards him. As for the green figure that had pounced towards him, it powerlessly fell to the ground. Only now did he see that it was actually a green wolf. Furthermore, there was an extremely small bloody hole in the green wolf's neck. Just as the green wolf fell to the ground, another green shadow leapt out from the grass and pounced towards Jinshin. Their mouths were wide open and emitted a thick stench that made it hard for Jianshun to breathe. Jianshun's expression didn't change at all. His right arm had already turned into a blur as he stabbed out with a light wind sword. Every time he stabbed out, it would accurately hit the throat of a green wolf. These green wolves were mostly of the first or second order and posed no threat to Jianshun. From the dense grass, the green shadows continued to leap out and pounce towards Jianshun. However, Jianshun didn't stop moving forward because of this. In front of him, the light wind sword had already turned into a dense net of swords that constantly flashed around him. Every time it flashed, it would take the life of a green wolf. There were at least 1,000 green wolves hidden in the grass. They had already formed an encirclement around Jianshun, completely surrounding him. Even so, there were no more than 20 green wolves that could attack Jianshun at the same time. Although he was aware of the terrifying number of green wolves around him, Jianshun didn't take it to heart. Against these first and second order magic beasts, Jianshun could easily kill them with one strike. Moreover, it was incomparably easy and the consumption of his energy was negligible. If other mercenaries encountered such a large number of green wolves, even if they had the strength of a great Saint Master, they would feel an incomparable headache. Although it was very difficult for a rank 1 or 2 magical beast to injure a great Saint Master, with thousands of them, even if they didn't retaliate and just stood there for you to kill, it would still cause your hands to go soft. In the boundless grasslands, encountering wolf attacks was a very common thing. Jianshun braved the attacks of countless green wolves as he advanced. The light wind sword in his hand was like the scythe of the Grim Reaper, mercilessly reaping the lives of the green wolves. Every single one of the green wolves that pounced on him was pierced through without exception. Even if they moved at high speed in the air, there was no way for them to dodge the scythe of the Grim Reaper. Behind Jianshun, fresh red blood had already formed a straight line. The blood that splattered everywhere had already dyed the surrounding grass red. The corpses of the green wolves had already been neatly laid out in a line over 100 meters long. Jianshun mercilessly massacred the entire way. One after another, the green wolves fearlessly leapt out from the grasslands, continuously pouncing towards Jianshun. It was as if they didn't feel fear or dread at all. In their eyes, it was as if Jianshun had some sort of deep hatred for them, and they were prepared to fight to the death. Blood continued to splatter in the air as the silver light from the light wind sword became the only thing in the world. In the midst of this sea of green blood, it blossomed with a brilliant radiance. Jianshun's body didn't make any large movements. From beginning to end, he maintained his normal speed as he advanced. Even if there were countless green wolves in front of him, they couldn't stop Jianshun in the slightest. Under such a rapid slaughter, in less than an hour, the number of green wolves that had died at Jianshun's hands numbered in the hundreds. On the other hand, there wasn't a single drop of blood on Jianshun's body. Oh, whoa. Right at this moment, a long howl rang out from the wolf pack. This howl was like a command, and the green wolves that had surrounded Jianshun immediately retreated. After leaving behind the corpses of their comrades, they retreated without any hesitation. The wolf pack had come quickly, but their speed of retreat wasn't slow either. In the blink of an eye, the remaining green wolves had used the grasslands as cover to escape without a trace. Only the hundreds of green wolf corpses and a long line of blood remained. Seeing that the green wolves had already disappeared without a trace, Jianshun sheathed his light wind sword. After going through such a slaughter, his face wasn't red, and he wasn't out of breath. It's said that the wild wolves of the grasslands are the most ferocious. It seems that this saying is true. Each and every one of them is willing to risk their lives without any fear of death. Jianshun's expression was calm as he sighed. After that, Jianshun didn't change his direction and continued to walk in a straight line. As for the hundreds of green wolf corpses, he didn't pay any attention to them. Although there were quite a few level 1 and level 2 monster cores, with Jianshun's current strength and wealth, he didn't care about level 1 or 2 monster cores. Moreover, with so many corpses, it would take a lot of time to deal with them. Since Jianshun only wanted to hurry along, he didn't want to waste any time. This grassland was very large. After trekking for 2 days, Jianshin finally walked out of the grassland and arrived at a desolate area. After walking for another 2 hours, he finally arrived at a road that was covered with numerous horse carriages. Chapter 165. P.S. Since the day before yesterday, there's been a power outage in my house. The problem is quite serious and has affected a wide area. It was only restored on the second night. I will update today as compensation. Jianshin looked at the group of people. Even though they were over 1,000 meters away, he could still see them clearly with his extraordinary eyesight. It should be a small caravan. There were less than 10 carriages, and there were only about 40 people escorting them. All of them were riding tall and strong horses. In the center of the caravan, there was a slightly luxurious carriage. Jianshin walked at a normal speed on the official road and soon met up with the small caravan. The dozens of burly men escorting the caravan swept their sharp gazes over Jianshin. Only a few of them casually glanced at Jianshin and then ignored Jianshin. When Jianshin was less than 5 meters away from the caravan, the two of them stopped at the same time. This was because the direction that Jianshin was walking in happened to be in front of the caravan. At this moment, the dozens of burly men escorting the caravan looked at Jianshin with very unfriendly gazes. Some of them even had a murderous glint in their eyes. "Who are you? Why are you blocking the way?" A burly man shouted at Jianshin. Jianshin didn't care about their attitude. He cupped his hands and said, "Gentlemen, I have lost my way after this. May I ask where I am?" Hearing this, many people frowned. This was because mercenaries who had been on the continent for many years were either very familiar with the surrounding terrain or had a map with them. It was almost impossible for them to get lost like Jianshin. These guards naturally wouldn't believe Jianshin's words so easily. "Stop talking nonsense and get lost. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite." One of the hot-tempered men couldn't help but shout. This man's upper body was bare, and his muscles were exposed under the sunlight, giving people a strong visual impact. His lower body was only wearing a pair of shorts. Hearing this, Jianshin's face darkened. He stared sharply at the burly man who spoke and snorted. "You better watch your mouth. Don't lose your life because of a sentence." The burly man's words clearly angered Jianshin. Jianshin's words made the faces of the mercenaries in front of him darken. The burly man who was stared at by Jianshin's sharp eyes couldn't help but tremble. He didn't know where the chilliness came from, but it rose from the bottom of his heart and a trace of fear flashed in his eyes. However, when he realized that he had actually revealed a timid expression under the gaze of a young man who was only in his 20s, he was instantly embarrassed and angry. However, before he could speak, a slightly deep voice sounded from behind him. "Friend, don't you think you've gone too far?" Following the voice, a middle-aged man riding a large black horse slowly walked up from behind. The middle-aged man's face was slightly gloomy and his eyes were cold as he looked down at Jianshin. "Captain Lon! Captain Lon!" When a middle-aged man riding a large black horse appeared, the surrounding mercenaries all called out. Jianshin stared straight at the middle-aged man and said, "Before you say that, you should first discipline your subordinates." The bare-chested, burly man snorted coldly and stared at Jianshin with an ominous glint in his eyes. He shouted, "Arrogant brat, you actually dare to be disrespectful to our captain. Let me bring your mother here to properly discipline you." As he spoke, the burly man leapt from his horse and raised his hand to slap Jianshin's face. When he heard the words, "You were born without a mother to teach you," Jianshin's face suddenly changed. A strong and dense killing intent flashed in his eyes. He immediately raised his left hand and firmly caught the burly man's palm. At the same time, his right hand formed a fist and punched towards the burly man's chest. "Kacha!" Following the sound of bones breaking, Jianshin's fist carried a strong saint force and fiercely struck the burly man's chest. Immediately, the burly man's entire chest caved in. A miserable cry came from the burly man's mouth. The fierce expression on his face immediately disappeared. His slightly tanned face had already turned pale. Following that, only a blurry shadow could be seen. Jianshin's leg carried a biting cold wind as it ruthlessly kicked the burly man's chest. The burly man's body, which weighed more than 200 pounds, was lifted high into the air. He flew for more than 10 meters before crashing to the ground with a boom. A cloud of dust flew up. Following that, a mouthful of fresh blood was spat out from the burly man's mouth. His face had already become incomparably pale and shriveled up. Seeing the burly man on the ground, unable to get up for a long time, the rest of the mercenaries' eyes were filled with disbelief. They were stunned for a long time before they reacted. Following that, they all shouted loudly as they took out their saint weapons and were about to attack Jinshin. "Stop!" The middle-aged man on the black horse, who was called Captain Lon, immediately shouted and stopped the angry mercenaries who were about to attack Jinshin. Captain Lon slowly urged his horse forward and stared at Jinshin with a serious expression. He said in a deep voice, "Sir, you really just want to clear the path. You don't have any other intentions." "That's right." Jinshin nodded slightly and said, "Captain Lon, give this little brother a map." Just as Jinshin finished speaking, a somewhat old voice came from behind. Although the voice was old, it was full of energy. Hearing this voice, Jinshin looked back. The voice came from the luxurious carriage that was sandwiched in the middle of the convoy. Captain Lan's eyes revealed a trace of respect. He cupped his hands in the direction of the carriage and said, "Yes, sir." Seeing Captain Lan's expression, Jinshin's eyes flashed. He couldn't help but take a few more glances at the carriage. Although he could feel that there was someone inside, he couldn't sense the strength of the person in the carriage from such a distance. Immediately after, Captain Lon took out a scroll from his spatial belt and threw it at Jinshin. He said, "This is the map of the Blue Wind Empire. Take it." Jinshin reached out to take the scroll and roughly looked at it. Immediately after, he rolled up the scroll and cupped his hands slightly. He didn't say anything and left. Captain Lon looked deeply at Jinshin's back and took a deep breath. He waved his hand and said, "Let's go." Then, the two of them treated the injuries on the injured man's body. They put him on the back of the horse, and the caravan continued to move forward in the same direction. Jinshin's gaze was fixed on the carriage. When he was not far from the carriage, he used his perception to sense the situation inside the carriage. Captain Lon had the strength of a high-level sacred master. Even a high-level sacred master would have to show a respectful expression. This kind of person had already aroused Jinshin's curiosity. However, other than feeling that there was a person sitting in the carriage and faintly discernible breathing, he didn't find anything else. Young man, it's not easy to have such strength at such a young age. Work hard. I believe that in the near future, your name will shake the continent." Just when Jinshin passed by the carriage, a slightly old voice suddenly sounded in his ear. It was as if someone was softly whispering in his ear. Jinshin's expression slightly changed and his body suddenly stiffened. He quickly turned around and looked around. However, he didn't find anyone beside him. Then, Jinshin stared at the carriage in disbelief. He had just heard this old voice. It came from the person sitting in the carriage. Moreover, what made Jinshin feel even more incredulous was that the mercenaries protecting the carriage didn't seem to have heard the words just now. Their expressions didn't change in the slightest. They were still the same as before. "Young man, if you come to the Holy Emperor's City of Gods in the future, you can use this token to find me." Right at this moment, the old voice sounded again. However, this time, the voice wasn't as mysterious as before. It came from within the carriage. Then, a token flickering with a purple-gold luster flew out of the carriage window and steadily landed in Jinshin's hand. This time, the mercenaries guarding the carriage all looked at Jinshin. Their eyes were filled with envy and extreme emotions. Mixed within, there was also some doubt. Looking at the purple-gold token in his hand, Jinshin's heart was in turmoil. At this moment, he finally understood that the mysterious person sitting in the carriage was actually an expert with unfathomable strength. This was because he didn't reach out to take the token. Even so, it still landed in his hand. Just this alone was definitely not something an ordinary person could do. However, at the same time, Jinshin also felt very strange. Since the person in the carriage was so powerful, why did he have to bring a group of people whose strength was only at the high level of Saint Master? Moreover, in this group, The average strength was still at the level of great saint. This clearly didn't make sense. Moreover, along the way, he was escorting so many goods. Could it be that he didn't have a spatial ring and a spatial belt? Cough, cough. The carriage was already far away. An obviously suppressed cough faintly sounded from the carriage. Jianchen stood in place and watched the carriage leave. His heart couldn't calm down for a long time. Phew! Jianchen let out a long breath. He looked at the token flickering with a purple-gold luster in his hand. This token was about the size of a palm. It was shaped like an arrow. It was as thick as a finger. It was heavy in his hand. The entire token was made of purple gold. Moreover, this purple gold had been specially refined. Its value was much higher than purple crystal coins. Just this token alone was worth a lot of money. Chapter 166. Encountering the mysterious person in the carriage along the way gave Jianchen a lot of doubts. From the way that Captain Lon addressed the person, it wasn't hard to tell that the person in the carriage was an old man. His strength was unfathomable in Jianchen's eyes. At the very least, he definitely wasn't a great Saint Master. This was because Jianchen could sense the strength of great Saint Masters, but the mysterious old man in the carriage was something that Jianchen couldn't sense at all. Looks like he has the strength of an Earth Saint Master at the very least. But why did he give me this medallion? Looking at the expensive medallion, Jianchen softly muttered to himself. There weren't any words on the medallion, but it was covered in strange patterns. Forget it, I won't think about it anymore. Let's hurry on. As for the city of gods and the Holy Emperor's kingdom, when I have enough strength in the future, I will naturally go there. Jianchen quickly calmed down and put the medallion into his space ring before continuing on his way. The official road was very quiet. Sometimes, there would be no one to be seen for a long time. However, during the day, there were still quite a few mercenaries and caravans riding on horses and various magical beasts. Because he had a map, Jianchen didn't have to worry about getting lost. Following that, Jianchen followed the route on the map and walked along the official road for 3 days before finally arriving at a city called Phoenix City. Fengyang City was a second-tier city. The entire city covered an area of several hundred kilometers. When they arrived here, the number of people on the official road had also increased. The wide road was almost filled with people. Groups of half-naked or armored mercenaries were riding on tall horses and some magic beasts. They were escorting carriages filled with goods as they slowly walked on the official road. All kinds of discussions filled the surroundings, and it was a hubbub of voices. Jianchen followed the flow of people as he slowly walked towards the tall city walls of Fengyang City. Among the mercenaries walking on the official road, many of them were traveling alone like Jianchen, so Jianchen didn't attract much attention. At the entrance of Fengyang City, there were many armored soldiers standing guard. All of them were standing straight as their sharp gazes swept across the people entering and leaving Fengyang City. "Stop! What are you doing?" At this time, a loud shout came from the side. A relatively large caravan was stopped by a soldier guarding the city. At this time, a short and stout middle-aged man wearing a brocade robe immediately walked up first. He pretended to be friendly and took the soldier's hand. Then, he quietly stuffed a few glittering coins into the soldier's hand and whispered something with a charming smile on his face. The soldier rubbed the coins that the short and stout middle-aged man had stuffed into his hand. The stern expression on his face immediately disappeared and was replaced with a look of satisfaction. He waved his hand and said, "Go in." Almost all the caravans that entered the city would be stopped by the soldiers and charged a small fee. This was extremely common on the Tianyuan continent. Of course, there were a few caravans that did not want to pay the fee, but without exception, the soldiers would forcefully search the caravans using various excuses to prevent dangerous goods from entering the city or to search the caravans for their goods. Although everyone was dissatisfied with their rudeness, these soldiers had the backing of the entire city behind them. They were not people that normal people could afford to offend. In front of them, even some of the more hot-tempered mercenaries could only swallow their anger. Jianchen entered Fengyang City without any obstructions. The soldiers were also very specific when it came to collecting fees. Mercenaries like Jianshin who were traveling alone or mercenary groups that weren't escorting goods were ignored. Only caravans would be stopped by them. As a second-class city, Fengyang City was very large. Compared to Wake City, it was undoubtedly much more prosperous. After entering the city, Jianshin asked around and found a place that sold horses. He spent a few gold coins to buy a decent horse and then rode it into the city. Fengyang City was very large. If one didn't have a mount, just walking from the east gate to the west gate would take half a day. Jianshin rode his horse through the wide road and finally arrived at a bank. He tied the reins of his horse and directly entered the bank. Inside the bank, Jianshin exchanged all the copper, silver, and gold coins he had on him for purple crystal coins. He only kept a small portion for himself. Almost all of this money was taken from the mercenaries in the magical Beast Mountain range by Jianshin. Now, it was almost enough to fill up a spatial belt. When he had exchanged all the money he needed to equip an entire spatial belt for purple crystal coins, he had actually exchanged over 30,000 purple crystal coins. In addition to the purple crystal coins he had on him, he had a total of 40,000 purple crystal coins. When Jianshin walked out of the bank, he already had a purple gold card in his hand. This card was known as the purple gold card in the Tianyuan continent. The purple gold card was used by everyone in the Tianyuan continent. It was used to store large amounts of purple crystal coins that couldn't be carried around. Of course, the purple gold card didn't have an independent space like a spatial belt. It was used to calculate the amount of purple crystal coins. With this card, one could deposit and withdraw money from any bank in the Tianyuan continent at any time. Moreover, in some high-class markets, one could use the purple gold card to make purchases and payments. It was undoubtedly much more convenient than directly carrying large amounts of purple crystal coins. The purple gold card was only half the size of a palm. It was made from a small amount of purple gold and some special materials using a secret method. Therefore, although it looked weak, it was extremely hard. Even an Earth Saint Master wouldn't be able to damage it. Although obtaining a purple gold card wasn't difficult, it wasn't something an ordinary person could obtain. This was because only those with 10,000 purple crystal coins had the right to obtain a purple gold card. Having a purple gold card wasn't just a symbol of status on the Tianyuan continent. It was also a symbol of wealth. The amount of purple crystal coins stored in a purple gold card could only be measured by the bank through special equipment. Even if an ordinary person wanted to fake it, it was impossible for them to do so. However, the bank only recognized the purple gold card and not the owner. As long as one possessed a purple gold card, they could deposit and withdraw money from any bank on the Tianyuan continent regardless of whether they were the owner of the card or not. Walking out of the bank, Jianshin played with the purple gold card in his hand. Right now, there were almost 40,000 purple crystal coins stored in the card. He had basically stored all the money he had on him, leaving only a small amount for his daily needs. When the people who passed by the bank saw the purple gold card in Jianshin's hand, they all revealed looks of envy and jealousy. There were even quite a few people who looked at Jianshin with a different meaning. Chapter 167. Afterwards, Jianshin asked around and arrived at a store that specialized in selling monster cores. The store that sold monster cores was not small. It was a 3-story building made entirely of bluestone. A signboard with the words Skywalker Monster Core Store hung high above the entrance. Although there were quite a few mercenaries who set up stalls to sell monster cores on the Tianyuan continent, almost all of them were low-level monster cores. High-level monster cores were rarely seen in street stalls. If one wanted to buy high-level monster cores, they would have to go to some stores. The larger the store, the higher the grade of the monster cores they sold. Moreover, the amount of monster cores that could be sold in regular stores was also very large. Unlike some mercenaries who only sold 3 to 5 Class 1 and Class 2 monster cores, if some influential clans wanted to buy a large amount of monster cores, they would basically go to some monster core store to buy them in bulk. As soon as he entered the monster core store, Jianshin discovered that in such a large store, there were surprisingly not many people. There were also no monster cores on display. There were only a dozen or so young female attendants working behind the counter. It did not seem like a place that sold monster cores at all. With some doubts, Jianshun came before a counter and asked, "Is this a place that sells monster cores?" Hearing this, the female attendant sitting behind the counter rolled her eyes at Jianshun. However, when she saw Jianshun's handsome and fair face, a strange light flashed at her eyes. Her gaze also lingered on Jianshun's handsome face for a while before she unhappily said, "Didn't you see the signboard on the entrance? If our Skywalker Monster Core store is not a place that sells monster cores, then what kind of place is it?" Jianshun awkwardly smiled. His gaze swept across the empty hall and said, "Then why don't you have a single monster core on display here?" Perhaps it was because Jianshun's appearance was irresistibly attractive to most young girls. The waitress smiled. His eyes stared straight at Jianshun as he patiently explained, "Our Skywalker Magic Nucleus store only displays high-tier magic nuclei, and they are all on the second and third floors. As for the first floor, only Tier 1 magic nuclei are sold, and Tier 1 magic nuclei are very common, so there is no need to display them." Hearing this, Jianshun was suddenly enlightened. This was his first time entering a shop that sold magic nuclei. He really didn't know about this before. At this time, the female attendant continued to ask, "Are you looking to buy magic cores? If you want to buy rank 1 magic cores, just tell me the quantity. If you want to buy rank 2 magic cores, you can only go to the second floor." Upon hearing this, Jianshun hesitated for a moment before asking, "I'm not buying magical cores. Do you buy magical cores here?" The waitress stared at Jianshun in surprise and asked in a surprised tone, "What? You're here to sell magic cores?" "That's right." Jianshun nodded slightly. The waitress looked at Jianshun with a strange expression, as if she didn't expect such a handsome young man to be here to sell magic cores instead of buying them. She had been working here this year, and this was the first time she had encountered such a situation. This was because the people who came here to sell magic cores were all burly men. However, the waitress didn't look down on Jianshun in the slightest because of this. She still smiled sweetly and said, "We also buy magic cores here. Please give me the magic cores you want to sell." Then, Jianshun handed 2 space belts to the waitress. These 2 space belts contained rank 1 and rank 2 magic cores. The waitress took the space belts and began to examine them. However, when she discovered the number of magic cores in the space belts, she couldn't help but reveal a shocked expression. This was because the total number of rank 1 and rank 2 magic cores in these 2 space belts was close to 2,000. This was the first time she had seen so many magic cores. Taking a deep breath, the waitress stared at Jianshun's handsome face with a complicated expression and said, "Please wait for a moment. I have to get our shopkeeper." Then, the waitress handed the space belts back to Jianshun and turned around to go to the second floor. Not long after, a middle-aged man wearing a blue brocade robe followed the waitress down from the second floor. "Shopkeeper Bai, this is the gentleman who wants to sell magic cores." The waitress arrived in front of Jianshun and said to the middle-aged man in the brocade robe. The middle-aged man called Shopkeeper Bai nodded slightly. He looked at Jianshun with a gentle gaze and said with a smile, "Little brother, can you show me the magic cores you want to sell?" Jianshun didn't hesitate at all and handed the 2 space belts to Shopkeeper Bai. Shopkeeper Bai took the 2 space belts and began to examine them. However, when he discovered the number of magic cores in the 2 space belts, he couldn't help but reveal a trace of surprise in his eyes. It's rare to see so many demon cores being sold at once in Phoenix Sun City. The middle-aged man sighed softly. Then, he looked deeply at Jianshun and smiled, "Little brother, I hope you don't mind me calling you that." Jianshun smiled and said, "Shopkeeper, you should tell me how much these magic cores can be sold for." "All right then, please allow me to count them." The middle-aged man smiled and didn't waste any more words. After inviting Jianshun to a secret room specially used to receive important guests, he began to order people to count the magic cores. When the magic cores were counted, the middle-aged man paid Jianshun a total of more than 5,000 purple crystal coins. Jianshun took the 5,000 purple crystal coins and walked out of the Sky Traverser Magic Core store. Jianshun rode his horse to the crowded market and bought some necessities for survival in the wild, as well as some clothes in case he needed them in the future. At this time, a few discussions in the noisy crowd attracted Jianshun's attention. It said that the annual auction will be held in 10 days. This time, there will be quite a few valuable items up for auction. Yes, we must go to this auction. Who knows? We might be able to find some treasures. Phoenix Sun City's Heavenly Phoenix Auction House is very famous in this area. Every time the auction is held, many people from other cities will come to participate. It's very lively. Hearing the discussions of these people, Jinshin's expression changed slightly. He suddenly had an idea. Auction house. Immediately, Jinshin didn't have the mood to continue strolling around. He mounted his horse and asked around. Soon, he arrived at the center of Phoenix Sun City and stopped in front of a huge two-story building. The building in front of him was very large. Although it only had 2 stories, its height was already more than 10 meters. It was even taller than some 4-story restaurants. Moreover, the area it occupied was also very large. Even if it was compared to the Mercenary Guild, it wouldn't be outdone. Above the entrance of the 2-story building, there was a 3-meter-tall bluestone board hanging high above. The words Heavenly Phoenix Auction House were written in flamboyant calligraphy. At the side of the auction house, there was a side door that many people were going in and out of. Jinshin hesitated for a moment before leaving on his horse. He then went to a restaurant not far from the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House and asked for a room. After tying up his horse, he left. Jinshin wandered around the vicinity a few times before finally finding a remote place. He then immediately took out some relevant materials and began to disguise himself. After about the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Jinshin stood up once again. His appearance had completely changed. At this moment, he looked like a middle-aged man with dark skin. His appearance was very ordinary, and he was the type that could be casually picked out in a crowd. The only unique thing about him was the scar on the left side of his face. After disguising himself, Jinshin changed into a new set of clothes and walked to the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House. He walked in through the side door. There were many people going in and out of this side door. Now that the annual auction was about to begin, many people had begun to register some of the more precious and diluted items in their hands. Sir, may I ask if you want to register any items? As soon as he arrived in front of the counter, a woman immediately asked in a sweet voice, "Can you call the person in charge here? I have something to discuss with him," Jinshin said in a deep voice. This voice was deliberately changed by him. "Okay, please wait a moment." The woman sized up Jinshin and hesitated for a moment before leaving her post and disappearing behind a door behind her. Soon, a white-haired old man wearing a luxurious robe followed the woman out. The woman respectfully led the old man in front of Jinshin and said, "Old Mr. Huang, this is the mister who is looking for you." She then introduced Jinshin to the old man. "Mister, this is our Heavenly Phoenix Auction House's senior appraiser, old Mr. Huang." Jinshin slightly cupped his hands towards the old man as a form of greeting. However, his actions were ignored by the old man. The old man sized up Jinshin and directly asked, "Mister, may I know what business you have with me?" Jinshin glanced at the people around him who were registering their items for auction and said, "Old Mr. Huang, I have a valuable item that I need to bring to your auction house. I wonder if old Mister can step aside and talk to me." Hearing Jinshin's words, the old man's eyes flashed. Without hesitation, he invited Jinshin to a quiet room. In a quiet room, Jinshin and the old man sat opposite each other. The room wasn't big, but the soundproofing was good. Moreover, it was completely sealed, so there was no need to worry about anyone looking in from the outside. "Mister, you should take out the item you want to auction and let this old man have a look." As soon as the two of them sat down, the old man couldn't help but ask, "Hee, old Mr. Huang, the item I want to auction is in here. However, please keep it a secret for me." Jinshin chuckled and threw a spatial belt on the table in front of him. "You can rest assured, our Heavenly Phoenix Auction House is quite famous in the surrounding cities. We will definitely not leak any information about our employer." The old man chuckled. Then, he picked up the spatial belt that Jinshin had placed on the table and began to inspect it. Chapter 168. Seeing the shocked expression on the old man's face, Jinshin smiled faintly and said, "Mr. Huang truly has a good eye." Even though the corpse of a Class 5 magical beast had greatly shocked the old man, he still managed to control his emotions very quickly. He took a deep breath and slowly calmed himself down. At this moment, the way he looked at Jianshun had completely changed. Mister, may I ask if you really want to auction off these 2 Class 5 magical beast corpses? The old man's eyes were filled with hope as he looked at Jianshun. Not only were Class 5 magical beast corpses extremely precious, they were also extremely hard to come by. In a second-class city like Phoenix City, Class 5 magical beast corpses had only appeared 2 or 3 times in the past few decades. However, every time they appeared, it would cause quite a bit of commotion in the nearby cities, causing quite a few influential clans to participate in the fight over them. If these 2 Class 5 magical beast corpses were to be auctioned off by the Tianfeng auction house, it would not only be a supreme honor for the auction house, but would also cause the Tianfeng auction house's reputation to soar. It would even be possible for the Tianfeng auction house to become the #1 auction house in this region. Seeing the old man's somewhat nervous expression, Jianshun couldn't help but reveal a trace of a smile on his face. He said, "That's right. I am indeed bringing these 2 Class 5 magical beast corpses to your auction house to auction off. Is there a problem?" Hearing this, the old man was overjoyed. He hurriedly waved his hand and said, No, it's our Heavenly Phoenix auction house's honor that you can sell these 2 Class 5 magical beast corpses. However, mister, these 2 Class 5 magical beast corpses are too important. It's already beyond my authority to deal with them. Please wait for a moment. I'll go invite our Heavenly Phoenix auction house's supervisor over to discuss further matters with you. Afterwards, Mr. Huang and Jianshun exchanged some pleasantries before directly leaving. In a quiet room, only Jianshun was left sitting there quietly. Jianshun sat casually on the chair with his head lowered and a look of contemplation on his face. Now, he was constantly thinking about his next move and how to deal with the trouble he might encounter. The corpses of Class 5 magical beasts were extremely precious. In a second-tier city like Fengyang City, it could be said to be extremely rare. Jianshun also understood in his heart that the 2 Class 5 magical beasts that he had auctioned off might not be as simple as causing a stir in this area. It was very likely that he would also encounter some trouble. Crack! With a soft sound, the door to the secret room was opened. When Jianshun looked up, he saw a woman in green slowly walk in with delicate steps. As she entered, a very pleasant fragrance quickly filled the entire sealed secret room. This woman had a tall figure, and from her appearance, she seemed to be around 30 years old. Her entire body exuded a unique aura that only mature women would have. Although her naturally beautiful face couldn't be said to be the type that could cause the downfall of a country, to some ordinary men, she still had an irresistible attraction. Behind her back, her long, dark green hair was unrestrained and casually draped over her back. A pair of bright, black eyes flickered with a shrewd light, as if they could see through one's heart. And behind this woman, Mr. Huang, who had left earlier, also entered the secret room and closed the door behind him. While Jianshun was sizing up this woman, the woman was also sizing up Jianshun, following which, she gracefully sat on the sofa opposite of Jianshun. A pair of black eyes flickered with a wise light as she stared at Jianshun. With a faint smile, she gently said, "This one is Urian, currently in charge of the Tianfeng auction house. How should I address this mister?" Jianshun cupped his hands slightly and said, "This one is Wu Yun. Miss Urian, please excuse me." Urian nodded slightly. Turning her head to look at Mr. Huang, she smiled and said, "So, it's Mr. Wu Yun. I just heard Mr. Huang say that Mr. Wu Yun seems to want to auction off the corpses of 2 Class 5 magical beasts. Is that true?" While speaking, Urian's pair of beautiful eyes stared unblinkingly at Jianshun's disguised face. "That's right, that's true." Jianshun placed the 2 Class 5 magical beast corpses on the table in front of him and calmly said, "Miss Urian, the items are here. Please examine them." "Okay." Urian picked up the space belt and began to examine it. But when she saw the corpses of the magical beasts, a trace of surprise appeared on her face. "That's right, they are Class 5 magical beasts. If I'm not wrong, they must be the winged divine ox and the swift cloud beast, Urian said softly. Jinshin nodded slightly. Miss Urian, I plan to auction off these 2 Class 5 magical beasts at your auction house. Is there a problem? Hearing that, Urian chuckled. She gracefully placed the space belt on the table in front of her. Her large, black, and bright eyes seemed to be filled with an irresistible charm as she stared at Jinshin's emotionless face. She said, Of course there's no problem. Considering that the magical beasts Mr. is auctioning off are far too rare here, and they can also bring greater influence to our auction house, I can represent the auction house in waiving all fees. Once these 2 Class 5 magical beasts are successfully auctioned off, Mr. will receive 100% of the auction price. Our auction house will not take any fees. Jinshin didn't care about the fees charged by the auction house, but he still clasped his hands in thanks. Of course, if Mr. is willing to auction off these 2 Class 5 magical beast cores at the same time, coupled with our Heavenly Phoenix auction house's publicity, I'm sure they'll fetch a very good price. Would Mr. consider it? Urian continued. A bitter smile appeared on Jinshin's face. He said, Miss Urian, I'm very sorry, but I found these 2 Class 5 magical beast corpses in the magical beast mountain range. When I found their corpses, their cores had already been taken away, so I don't have any Class 5 magical beast cores. Oh, is that really the case? Urian looked at Jinshin in disbelief with a smile. Hearing those words, Jinshin's face sank slightly. He snorted lightly and said with some dissatisfaction, Miss Urian, I've already said it. It's up to you to believe me or not. Seeing Jinshin's somewhat angry expression, Urian smiled apologetically and said gently, Mr. Wu Yun, please don't get angry. This little girl was only asking casually and didn't mean anything else. Please don't misunderstand. As she said that, Urian quickly took out a piece of paper and said, Mr. Wu Yun, please sign here. At the same time, these 2 Class 5 magical beasts will be handed over to our Heavenly Phoenix auction house for safekeeping. I wonder if Mr. has any objections? I know the rules of the auction house. All right, I'll hand these 2 Class 5 magical beasts to you for safekeeping for the time being. However, if anything happens to the goods during this time, your auction house will have to take responsibility. Chapter 169. Afterwards, Jinshin and the supervisor of the auction house, Urian, discussed some other matters. In the end, Jinshin left the 2 Class 5 magical beast corpses in the auction house and left by himself. After Jinshin's departure, only the appraiser and Urian remained in the quiet room. Old Mr. Huang closed the door of the secret room and returned to his seat. His gaze lingered on the space belt in Urian's hand for a while before he said to Urian, Urian, the magic cores of these 2 Class 5 magical beasts, do you think it's possible that Wu Yun has them? Urian gently stroked the spatial belt containing the 2 5th-tier magic beasts with her slender fingers. Even though it was covered in blood, she didn't show any disgust or disgust as a woman. It's very likely. From the wounds on the 2 magical beasts, they should have killed each other. In the end, both sides were injured and someone took advantage of the situation. From the wounds where the monster cores were taken out, the person shouldn't be very powerful. At the very least, he should be far weaker than the Class 5 magical beasts. Otherwise, it would have been extremely easy for him to take out the monster cores. It would have been impossible for the wounds to be so messy, Urian said after some thought. However, we can't rule out the possibility that the 2 Class 5 monster cores have really been taken away by someone, and that person called Wu Yun just picked up the corpses of the 2 Class 5 magical beasts for nothing. However, the possibility of that is extremely small. Only Earth Saint Masters or Heaven Saint Masters would not care about the corpses of Class 5 magical beasts. However, the 2 Class 5 magical beast monster cores were clearly not taken away by someone like that. Old Man Huang nodded with that. Then it's very likely that the 2 Class 5 magical beast cores are with Wu Yun. Yeah, it's very likely. Urian nodded in agreement. Then she sighed and said, forget it. Whether the Class 5 monster core is with Wu Yun or not has nothing to do with us. We just need to do our job well. Although the Class 5 monster core is expensive compared to the reputation of our Heavenly Phoenix auction house, it is insignificant. All right, Old Huang, let's not think about the matter of the fifth-order monster cores. We just need to focus on our work. This time, we were able to discover 2 fifth-order monster cores by accident. This is a very rare opportunity for our Tianfeng auction house. We must make good use of this opportunity and increase the reputation of our Tianfeng auction house. Yes, I understand. Master Huang nodded. Also, we still have to keep the matter regarding Wu Yun a secret. We definitely can't leak any information about the owner of a Class 5 magical beast. Otherwise, not only will our Heavenly Phoenix auction house not gain any benefits, it will also greatly affect our reputation. Just how important reputation is to an auction house, I'm sure Old Huang is clear about that. Although Urian's voice was very soft, it was filled with an unquestionable tone, as if she was a superior commanding officer. Yes, this old man understands. Master Huang hurriedly replied. After leaving the Heavenly Phoenix auction house, Jianshan specifically chose to walk along the crowded streets. After making sure that no one was following him, he slowly arrived at a secluded alley. Looking at the 2 sides of the alley, Jianshan hesitated for a moment before taking out his light wind sword and cutting open the door. He quickly entered the small house. The small house was very dark and had very little visibility. There were only a few simple pieces of furniture inside, and from the thick layer of dust on the table, it was clear that no one had lived in this house for a long time. After casually looking around, he immediately took out some items from his space pouch and began to clean up his appearance. He even changed his clothes and changed his hairstyle before leaving the wooden hut. He then walked out of the alley from the other end of it. When Jianshan once again appeared in front of everyone, he had already returned to his original appearance. Even his aura had undergone a subtle change. At this moment, even if Master Huang and Urian were to stand in front of Jianshan, they probably wouldn't be able to connect the current Jianshan with the previous Wu Yun. The difference between the two was simply too great. Jianshan first went to buy a detailed map of Phoenix City before walking to the Heavenly Wind auction house. He familiarized himself with the surroundings of the Heavenly Wind auction house before taking a stroll around the area. Although the corpses of Class 5 magical beasts were very common in large cities where experts gathered, in a place like Phoenix City, they were very precious. Jianshan guessed that the auction for Class 5 magical beasts this time wouldn't be so peaceful. Thus, he had to familiarize himself with the surroundings. If he were to encounter any unexpected situations, he would have a way to escape without being forced into a panic. For the entire afternoon, Jianshan walked around the nearby area. He didn't miss a single street or alley. When night fell, Jianshan finally returned to the inn that he had prepared beforehand. After a simple dinner, Jianshan closed himself in his room and sat cross-legged on the bed with his eyes slightly closed. However, Jianshan didn't cultivate at this time. Perhaps it was because his strength had increased too quickly, or perhaps it was because he had been borrowing the energy from monster cores to cultivate, causing some problems in his body. Ever since he reached the high level of Saint Master, Jianshan gradually discovered that his control over the Saint Force in his body was no longer as smooth as before. He could no longer command it as he wished. Although the current problem wasn't too serious and didn't affect his battle prowess much, Jianshan was very clear in his heart that if this situation wasn't resolved, it would definitely have a huge impact on him in the future. Thus, during this period of time, Jianshan didn't cultivate. He was afraid that if his strength increased too quickly, it would cause this problem to worsen. If it reached a point where even he couldn't control it, then it would be very troublesome. Chapter 170. For the entire night, Jianshan sat on his bed, constantly refining the Saint Force in his body to ensure that he could control it like an extension of his arm. Before the hidden danger in his body was completely eliminated, Jianshan did not dare to continue cultivating. He was afraid that the hidden danger would continue to grow. The Saint Force in his body flowed through his meridians under Jianshan's control. As the Saint Force followed a fixed path through his meridians, Jianshan could clearly sense that his control over his own strength was constantly increasing. At the same time, the compatibility between the Saint Force and his body was slowly increasing. At the same time, Jianshan discovered that as his blood constantly flowed through his body, some of the wondrous factors in his blood began to change his body and organs at an extremely slow rate. This was the anti-poison factor he had absorbed from the silver-striped golden snake's blood. Although the anti-poison factor had already fused with Jinshin's blood a year ago, it would take a long time for it to change his body and organs. It was not something that could be done in a short period of time. Right now, Jinshin's body and organs only contained a very small portion of the anti-poison factor. His body of impenetrable poison was only at the initial stage. Only when all of his flesh and organs contained the anti-poison factor would his body of impenetrable poison reach the grand ascension stage. The night passed peacefully just like that. When the sun rose the next morning, the saint force that had been circulating in Jinshin's body for an entire night slowly gathered in his dantian. In the end, it formed the shape of a sword. Although it was still a little blurry, it was clearly much clearer than when Jinshin had just become a saint master. After leaving his room, Jinshin went to the first floor of the inn and casually ordered some magical beast meat before enjoying his breakfast. With his current strength, he would not feel the slightest bit hungry even if he did not eat for an entire day. However, eating 3 meals a day had gradually become a habit for Jinshin. Unless there was a special situation where he could not eat, Jinshin would not miss a single meal. Tasting delicious food was actually a form of enjoyment as well. Because it was the peak time for eating in the morning, the few tables in the inn were quickly filled. A large number of people dressed as mercenaries sat around the wooden tables in groups of 3 to 5. They loudly discussed recent events and their own experiences, causing the entire inn to become noisy. Jinshin sat at a table by himself and slowly enjoyed the dishes he had ordered. As he enjoyed the food, he listened to the mercenaries chat. "Hey, brothers, this morning, the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House sent out news that a 5th-rank magical beast will be auctioned in the annual large-scale auction in a few days." The one who spoke was a youth wearing a cyan robe. "What? A Class 5 magical beast? Oh heavens, that's a high-class 5 magical beast that's no weaker than an Earth Saint Master. How can the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House have a Class 5 magical beast? Buddy, you're not lying to me, right?" As soon as the young man finished speaking, someone immediately spoke out in disbelief. A confident smile appeared on the face of the young man in azure robes. With a sinister smile, he said, "Brothers, why don't we make a bet? If what I said is false, then I lose. If what I said is true, then I win. What do you think? All right, let's make a bet. I don't believe that a Class 5 magical beast would appear in a second-class city like the Phoenix City to be auctioned." Someone immediately shouted out, "I've lived for over 30 years. Although I've heard quite a bit about Class 5 magical beasts, I've never seen one with my own eyes. All right, I'll make a bet as well. I'll bet 2 gold coins. If the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House really does have a Class 5 magical beast up for auction, then even if I lose these 2 gold coins, it won't be a loss." Another person at the same table spoke out. The conversation at this table was quite loud, so it quickly attracted the attention of a few people who were eating nearby. Immediately, someone stood up and walked over to the table. He cupped his hands and said, "Brothers, you just said that the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House will have a Class 5 magical beast up for auction. Is this true?" Hearing this, the young man chuckled and said, "Brother, since no one believes that this matter is true, then why don't we all make a bet? Wouldn't that be more interesting?" That person slightly hesitated before finally nodding his head and agreeing. "All right, then I'll bet 5 gold coins. If the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House really does have a Class 5 magical beast up for auction, then even if I lose these 5 gold coins, it won't be a big deal. All right, I'll also make a bet. I've been in Phoenix City for 20 years, and I've never seen a Class 5 magical beast up for auction. Furthermore, I've never even seen a Class 5 magical beast before. Class 5 magical beasts usually only appear in king-tier cities. They're even rarely seen in first-tier cities. For a Class 5 magical beast to be auctioned in a second-tier city like Phoenix City, this news is most likely fake. Forget it, since everyone is so interested, I'll also make a bet. This news is definitely fake. I'll also make a bet. If a Class 5 magical beast were to appear in an auction in a first-tier city, then it would be somewhat believable. However, for it to appear in a second-tier city, then that's clearly impossible. The conversation at these tables quickly attracted the attention of everyone who was eating in the restaurant. Immediately, everyone's interest in the Class 5 magical beast was greatly piqued, and they all joined in on the bet. Seeing the actions of these people in the restaurant, Jianshun, who was sitting to the side and slowly enjoying his food, bitterly smiled and shook his head. Right now, he was asking himself whether it was a wise decision to auction 2 Class 5 magical beasts in a second-tier city like Phoenix City. However, Jianshun was even more clear in his heart that if he were to auction the Class 5 magical beasts in a first-tier city or King City, he would definitely be able to sell them for a good price. However, the pressure he would face would be even greater. This was because almost all of the powerful experts were gathered in prosperous places. If someone were to cause trouble for him in those places, then it would be very difficult for him to deal with them. However, it was completely different in a second-tier city like Phoenix City. In a place like Phoenix City, Earth Saint Masters were extremely rare. Even if a great Saint Master came to cause trouble for him, he would still be able to deal with them. It was precisely because of this that Jianshun decided to auction the Class 5 magical beasts in Phoenix City. Just as the people in the restaurant were in full swing discussing the Class 5 magical beast, the sound of gongs and drums suddenly came from outside. Dong! Dong! Important news, important news. The Heavenly Wind Auction House will be auctioning 2 Class 5 magical beasts in their annual auction in 9 days. This news not only caused the people outside to become dumbstruck in an instant, but the originally noisy restaurant also became completely silent in an instant. Everyone's faces were filled with disbelief. Chapter 171. Although there was only a difference of 1 rank between a Class 5 and a Class 4 magical beast, this difference was a qualitative change. Class 4 magical beasts were nothing in the Tian Yuan continent, but Class 5 magical beasts were extremely precious. This was not only because Class 5 magical beasts were much stronger than Class 4 magical beasts, but also because Class 5 magical beasts were extremely difficult to kill or capture. 5th rank magical beasts already possessed a certain level of intelligence, and due to their innate advantage, a 5th rank magical beast strength was generally stronger than a human of the same rank. Therefore, in a one-on-one situation, it was very difficult for a human to kill a 5th rank magical beast. Moreover, in the circle of 5th rank magical beasts, there was an unspoken rule that if they killed each other, the other 5th rank magical beasts would not interfere. However, once they encountered an invasion by a human, they would cooperate with each other and work together to resist the human. This was why 5th rank magical beasts were so rare. Hearing the sounds of gongs and drums outside, Jianshun felt extremely surprised. Although he knew that the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House would definitely publicize the news of a Class 5 magical beast, he never thought that they would use such a method. The sounds of gongs and drums, as well as the crackling of firecrackers, could be heard from the streets outside. The news that the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House will be holding an auction for a Class 5 magical beast spread like wildfire throughout the city. In less than half a day, almost the entire city knew that the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House would be auctioning off a Class 5 magical beast. The appearance of a rank 5 magical beast in a second-class city like Fengyang City was an extremely shocking and rare occurrence. In order to make this auction as grand as possible, the Tianfeng Auction House spared no effort in promoting the news. Not only did the entire Fengyang City know about the appearance of a rank 5 magical beast, even the people in the surrounding cities also knew about it. In a short period of time, the news that the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House would be holding an auction for a Class 5 magical beast in a few days had already spread to a radius of several thousand kilometers. Not long after, various large powers and people who were interested in the Class 5 magical beast all set off towards the Phoenix City. In the center of Fengyang City, there was a huge mansion quietly standing there. At the entrance of the mansion, there were 10 armored soldiers standing straight outside the tightly shut door. Their bodies did not move at all, as if they were stone sculptures. Above the entrance, there was a huge sign with the words City Lord's Mansion written on it. Each word was bold and powerful. Just these 3 words alone gave people a sense of pressure. This mansion was the City Lord's mansion of the Phoenix City. At this moment, in an elegant garden within the City Lord's mansion, a middle-aged man wearing a white robe was practicing martial arts with a large blade in his hand. His movements were incomparably fast as he quickly moved back and forth in the garden. The large blade in his hand had already been swung around by him, creating afterimages that densely covered the space in front of him. It was impossible to pinpoint the exact location of the blade. Powerful and vigorous Saint force was emitted, causing the space in front of him to slightly distort. At this moment, an old man who looked like a housekeeper quickly walked in from outside. Looking at the middle-aged man practicing martial arts in the garden, he said, "City Lord, we just received news that the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House will be auctioning off 2 Class 5 magical beasts in this year's large-scale auction." "What? Class 5 magical beasts?" Hearing this, the middle-aged man who was practicing martial arts in the garden suddenly stopped what he was doing. Turning his head, he looked at the housekeeper with a face full of shock and said, "Housekeeper Chung, what did you just say?" The housekeeper repeated what he had said before. After hearing this, the middle-aged man's face became even more shocked. There was a faint trace of disbelief on his face as he said with a tone full of disbelief, "Housekeeper Chung, the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House will be auctioning off 2 Class 5 magical beasts. Is this true?" "City Lord, this news was spread by the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House. Moreover, this old man also went to the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House. This old man personally went to the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House to confirm this matter. This matter is absolutely true," the housekeeper said with a firm tone. "In these past few decades, Class 5 magical beasts have only appeared in our Phoenix City 2 or 3 times. But this time, they are actually auctioning them off. This is the first time in these past few decades that we have seen such a thing." The middle-aged man frowned as he pondered for a moment before continuing to ask, "Housekeeper Chung, do you know who made these 2 Class 5 magical beasts? They actually brought such precious things to our Phoenix City to be auctioned off. This matter is a little strange." This old man does not know. The middle-aged man had already expected the old man's answer. There was not the slightest trace of dissatisfaction on his face. After muttering to himself for a moment, he said, "Housekeeper Chung, go and invite the owner of the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House, Zhou Tian, to our residence as a guest." "Yes, City Lord." In a house in Phoenix City, an old man was sitting in a bookish study room, reading a book in his hand. At this moment, there was a knock on the door from outside. Hearing this, the old man frowned slightly and said with dissatisfaction, "Who is it? Didn't I say not to disturb me when I am reading?" "Father, it's your son. Your son has an important matter to report to you. Come in." The door opened, and a middle-aged man dressed in black walked in. "Father, I just received news that the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House will be auctioning off 2 Class 5 magical beasts this year." "What? Class 5 magical beasts?" Hearing this, the old man was slightly shocked and immediately put down the book in his hand. He turned his head to look at the middle-aged man standing in front of the desk and said in a deep voice, "Jinner, is this true? Your son personally went to the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House to inquire, and it is absolutely true." The middle-aged man slightly lowered his head and said with certainty, "Class 5 magical beasts are extremely rare in a second-class city. Where did the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House get Class 5 magical beasts?" The old man softly muttered to himself. Suddenly, his eyes flashed, and he looked at the middle-aged man and asked again, "Jinner, do you know if the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House is auctioning off a Class 5 magical beast monster core or a Class 5 magical beast infant? Or should I say, is it just a Class 5 magical beast corpse?" Your son does not know. The Heavenly Phoenix Auction House is very strict about this kind of information. Furthermore, only a few of the upper echelons know about it. Your son was unable to obtain any more information from them. Immediately go and investigate. The old man immediately ordered. Yes, the news of a Class 5 magical beast not only attracted many people to come to Phoenix City to observe, it also attracted the attention of various large powers. In the next few days, there was an endless stream of people rushing to Fengyang City from all directions, causing the number of people staying in Fengyang City to increase rapidly. Very soon, all the inns and restaurants in the city were full. As the number of people staying in the inns increased rapidly, the price of the inns also skyrocketed. Very soon, it had risen to 10 times the usual price. At the same time, the security of Phoenix City was extremely tight these few days. Groups of armored soldiers could be seen patrolling the streets. Chapter 172. Right now, Fengyang City could be said to be filled with all kinds of people. Because of the news of Class 5 magical beasts, not only did it attract the local powers of Fengyang City, it even attracted a lot of foreign powers. At the same time, the surroundings of the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House became strange. Almost every day, there would be people dressed in all kinds of clothes lingering around the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House. Their eyes would constantly scan the people entering and exiting the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House. Although the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House had kept a tight lid on the information regarding Class 5 magical beasts, there was no way they could hide the truth forever. Under the all-pervasive investigation of the various major powers, they were finally able to obtain more specific information regarding the Class 5 magical beasts and the origins of the 2 Class 5 magical beasts on the day before the auction. 2 Class 5 magical beast corpses that had lost their monster cores, and a mysterious outsider whose strength was unknown. He was definitely not an Earth Saint Master. This was the information that the various powers found. Even though the results were not satisfactory, it did not reduce their interest in the Class 5 magical beasts at all. In a restaurant in Fengyang City, several middle-aged men were gathered in a small room. Investigate. Order everyone to go and investigate. We must find out who the person who auctioned off the 2 Class 5 magical beasts is. The 2 Class 5 monster cores are definitely on him. Also, that person will definitely appear in tomorrow's auction. Tell people to pay close attention to anyone who enters or exits the auction house. A middle-aged man wearing a white robe ordered in a low voice. In a luxurious manner in Fengyang City, in the discussion hall, a middle-aged man with a dignified face sat at the head of the table. He looked down at the middle-aged men and old men sitting below him and said in a deep voice, "We've already found out about the Class 5 magical beasts. Even though it's just 2 corpses without monster cores, their value is still very high. It's said that eating the flesh of Class 5 magical beasts can not only greatly strengthen one's physique and slightly increase one's saint force, but the essence, blood, and organs of the Class 5 magical beasts can also increase one's chances of breaking through to the Earth Saint Master realm. Therefore, in tomorrow's auction, we must try our best to get the 2 Class 5 magical beasts. Even if we can't get both, we must at least get one of them. In addition, the 2 Class 5 monster cores must still be on that person's body. The value of a Class 5 monster core is even more precious than a Class 5 magical beast corpse. This is something that's rarely seen in Fengyang City in the past few decades. Therefore, our Huangpu clan must obtain these 2 Class 5 monster cores. Tomorrow, send more people to make arrangements. We must find out just who auctioned the Class 5 magical beasts. Patriarch. Although the news says that the person who auctioned the Class 5 magical beasts isn't very strong, he was able to obtain 2 Class 5 magical beast corpses. This in itself shows that he's not simple. I'm guessing that there might be a powerful expert supporting him from behind. A white-haired old man sitting below cupped his hands and said, "Impossible." The middle-aged man at the head of the table immediately denied this and said, "The news we've received is very clear. These 2 Class 5 magical beasts killed each other, and in the end, they were taken advantage of by someone else. Moreover, from the wounds where their monster cores were taken out, that person's strength isn't very strong. Therefore, everyone's worries are completely unnecessary." Patriarch is wise. This old man was muddle-headed. The old man cupped his hands and then sat down again. "All right, time is of the essence now. Next, let's discuss tomorrow's arrangements." In the pitch-black night, Fengyang City appeared to be very quiet. Only groups of patrolling soldiers were constantly shuttling through the various streets and alleys. Currently, Fengyang City had gathered various powers from various places, causing the entire city to become a mixed bag of crooks and honest people. The city lord of Fengyang City had no choice but to send a group of soldiers to patrol through the night to ensure the safety of the entire city. In various places within Fengyang City, different low voices of discussion and orders could be heard. However, all of these voices were related to the class 5 magical beasts and the mysterious person who auctioned them off. The night passed very quickly. When the first light of dawn had just risen in the distant horizon in the east, the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House, which was located in the center of Fengyang City, had already opened its doors. Outside the doors, there were already lanterns and colored banners. Many auction house employees were busy outside. Even further away, there were many people dressed in different attire waiting for the auction to begin. Today was the day of the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House's annual large-scale auction. In the past, the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House would be the most lively day of the year. Today, the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House would be auctioning off class 5 magical beasts that were rarely seen. Therefore, this year's auction was much more lively than before. Thus, there were many people waiting outside the auction house even before dawn. After dawn, the sun had just risen. When the sun emitted a fiery red radiance as it slowly rose from the distant horizon, more and more people had gathered outside of the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House in Phoenix Sun City. They had already blocked off several nearby streets, making it difficult for the carriages and caravans to move even a single step. A large number of people had been waiting here for about 2 hours, along with the deafening sounds of gongs and drums and a series of firecrackers. This year's annual large-scale auction had finally officially begun. However, not just anyone could participate in this year's auction. In the past, every time the auction opened, there would be a ticket fee, and this year was no exception. However, perhaps because of the Class 5 magical beast, the ticket fee this year was especially expensive. The original price of 5 gold coins had risen to 50 gold coins, which was 10 times the original price. Although the actions of the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House had caused many people to be dissatisfied, it still couldn't stop those who had a lot of money in their pockets. Moreover, the actions of the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House had also eliminated some people who were only here to watch the fun and not buy anything, leaving enough space for those who were extremely interested in the 5th rank magical beast. As the doors to the interior of the auction house officially opened, the people who had been waiting outside for a long time held onto their tickets and entered one after another. Jinshin had also returned to his appearance as the middle-aged man who had entered the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House last time. He blended into the crowd and followed the flow of people as he slowly walked into the auction house. Chapter 173. The space was divided into 2 levels. The upper level was also filled with seats, and the total number of seats on both levels exceeded 10,000. There were also several dozen VIP rooms on the edges. The VIP rooms were isolated from the outside by a special kind of glass, so the scene outside could be clearly seen from the inside. However, from the outside, it was impossible to see the situation inside the room. In front of him was a 2-meter-tall booth. The auction items would also be displayed on the booth, but at this moment, the booth was covered by a huge red cloth, so the situation inside could not be seen at all. Jianshun found an inconspicuous and remote seat and sat down. He then quietly waited for the auction to begin. Around him, people continuously walked over and sat down. After about 2 hours, there were no empty seats left in the huge auction house. Moreover, there were still many people standing and crowding in the empty space at the very back. When everyone was seated, 2 brilliant fireworks suddenly shot out from the ground in front of them. Immediately, the huge red cloth that covered the entire booth began to slowly rise. As the red cloth rose, the scene hidden behind it slowly appeared in everyone's line of sight. An old man in his 60s stood straight on the auction stage. In front of him was a dark red wooden table. The old man looked around and cleared his throat. He then loudly said, "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our Heavenly Phoenix Auction House's annual auction. This old man is Gurong. This time, I will be the host of the auction. I hope that everyone will be able to find something they like in this auction." The old man paused for a moment before continuing. "This year's auction will be the most intense and the most lively one since the establishment of our Heavenly Phoenix auction house. This is because in this year's auction, our auction house will be displaying two extremely precious items for public auction. As for what those items are, I believe that many of you already know. This old man will not waste time here. All right, I now announce that the auction officially begins. I never thought that the host of the auction would actually have the strength of a Saint Master." Looking at the old man on the booth, Jianshun inwardly muttered. The old man's words were completely shouted with saint force, so in this huge space, almost everyone could hear him. Following the old man's order, over 10 half-naked men walked out from behind the booth. They scattered around the booth and swept their sharp gazes across the crowd below. They were clearly guarding against people with ill intentions. Immediately after, a young and beautiful woman in revealing clothes slowly walked out from behind the booth. She held a tray covered by a red cloth high above her head and walked with nimble and small steps to the front of the host. She then squatted down and carefully placed the tray in her hands on the table in front of the host. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will now begin the auction of the first item." Just what is this item covered by a red cloth? Let me show it to everyone. As he spoke, the host reached out and removed the red cloth, revealing a jade bottle that was half the size of a palm. The first item to be auctioned is the 100 Grass Divine Effect Pill. I believe that everyone present is familiar with the 100 Grass Divine Effect Pill. In the area of healing, it is a rare medicine. With the 100 Grass Divine Effect Pill, it is equivalent to having an additional layer of protection. This bottle has a total of 500 Grass Divine Pills. The starting price is 10 purple crystal coins. Every increment must not be less than 1 purple crystal coin. The auction will now begin. 11 purple crystal coins, 12 purple crystal coins, 13 purple crystal coins, 15 purple crystal coins. As soon as the host finished speaking, the crowd below began to fight fiercely. The 100 Herbs Divine Efficacy Pill had an extremely good healing effect, regardless of whether it was external injuries or internal injuries. Once the 100 Herbs Divine Efficacy Pill was consumed, the injuries would quickly stabilize and heal. Although the effect was not as miraculous as the Radiant Saint Force, it was still popular among many people. This was because Radiant Saint Masters were extremely rare on the Tianyuan continent. Their status was extremely high as well. Only a few large organizations and clans had the ability to hire Radiant Saint Masters to serve them for a long time. This was why healing medicines were still very popular on the Tianyuan continent. The higher the quality of the medicine, the higher the price. Jianshun sat there quietly as he watched the people fighting over the 100 Grass Divine Pill. A faint smile appeared on his face. Although the 100 Grass Divine Pill was very effective in healing, it was completely useless to him who could control Radiant Saint Force. After a round of fighting, the 100 Grass Divine Pill was finally purchased by someone for the high price of 28 purple crystal coins. Afterwards, items were brought up for auction one after another. There were many strange items and rare treasures. However, there was nothing that caught Jianshun's interest. Very soon it was noon. At this time, the attendants of the auction house delivered lunch to everyone who participated in the auction. However, the auction did not stop because of this. Instead, it continued. As the strange items and rare treasures were auctioned off one by one, the auction reached its final moments very soon. Ladies and gentlemen, the following items will be the last 2 items of this auction. They are also the items that everyone is most interested in. At this point, the host's tone suddenly paused. He glanced around and found that everyone was in high spirits. They were all staring at the booth attentively. The host smiled and said, "I think everyone has been looking forward to the last few items for a long time. Since that's the case, I won't waste any more time. Men, bring the items up." As soon as the host finished speaking, a few burly men walked out from the back with a stretcher. With their appearance, almost everyone's gazes gathered on the stretcher. The stretcher was covered by a layer of wide black cloth, making it impossible to see what was inside. However, from the protruding part, everyone could guess what was inside. Chapter 174. At that moment, the gazes of over 10,000 people gathered on the stretcher covered by the black cloth. A Class 5 magical beast. Even though it was only a corpse, it still attracted the attention of so many people. Many of them understood that this was probably the only time in their lives that they would see a Class 5 magical beast. After all, Class 5 magical beasts were not like Earth Saint Masters. They could be casually seen in a few bustling cities. There were even Earth Saint Masters in a few large organizations and sections. However, Class 5 magical beasts were different from humans. They usually stayed in their own territories and rarely ventured outside. Even if they did, it would be very difficult for those who had seen them to survive. As a result, Class 5 magical beasts were not something that the weak could see. When the host lifted the black cloth that covered the stretcher, the thing hidden under the black cloth finally appeared before the eyes of the tens of thousands of people who were looking forward to seeing it. It was a pitch-black magical beast the size of an ox. A few people with exceptional eyesight, or those who were close enough, could even clearly see a pair of short black wings on the back of the magical beast. The magical beast silently laid on the stretcher without moving at all. Its body was 4 to 5 meters long, making it seem like a small mountain. Is this a Class 5 magical beast? A Class 5 magical beast actually looks like this. It doesn't seem much different from a Class 1 or Class 2 magical beast. I've finally seen a Class 5 magical beast today. This trip has been worth it. These 50 gold coins were well spent. It really is the corpse of a Class 5 magical beast. It looks like it should be a winged god bull. Along with the appearance of the corpse of the 5th rank magical beast, the originally silent auction hall was instantly filled with a large number of buzzing sounds. Everyone's eyes were gathered on the corpse of the 5th rank magical beast on the display stage, and the sound of discussions and exclamations did not stop. Among them, many had lived for dozens of years, and today was the first time they had seen a 5th rank magical beast. Although it was only a corpse, it made them feel satisfied. Cough, cough. Suddenly, a coughing sound spread throughout the auction venue. Following this coughing sound, the noisy auction venue gradually quieted down. The auctioneer on the stage smiled at the tens of thousands of people participating in the auction. He loudly announced, "Everyone, the corpse of the magical beast before me is the Class 5 winged god bull. Even though it has lost its monster core, it's still extremely valuable. I'm sure everyone knows that if you eat the meat of a Class 5 magical beast over a long period of time, not only will it strengthen your body, even your Saint Force will increase slightly. Moreover, it's said that it can even increase your chances of breaking through to Earth Saint Master." The originally quiet auction venue once again became noisy after hearing the last sentence of the auctioneer. Everyone's eyes were heated as they stared at the rank 5 magical beast corpse on the stage. Their hearts were filled with desire and greed. On the Tianyuan continent, there was indeed a rumor that if one ate the meat of Class 5 magical beasts over a long period of time, it could increase the chances of a great Saint Master breaking through to Earth Saint Master. Earth Saint Master. It was a simple phrase, but in the eyes of the tens of thousands of great Saint Masters on the Tianyuan continent, it was unreachable. Although there was only a single step between Earth Saint Master and Great Saint Master, this single step had blocked the path of countless people on the Tianyuan continent who knew how many people had lost their lives trying to break through to Earth Saint Master. This was because the only way to break through from Great Saint Master to Earth Saint Master was to shatter the Saint weapon in one's body into powder and absorb a large amount of energy to refine the powder one by one. Only by doing this could one be considered to have successfully broken through to Earth Saint Master. However, the Saint weapon was everyone's Saint weapon. Once it was damaged, the owner would be injured as well. Once the Saint weapon was shattered, there would only be 2 outcomes. The best outcome would be losing all of one's Saint Force and becoming a cripple who could no longer cultivate. The worst outcome would be directly losing one's life. As a result, less than 1% of the people on the Tianyuan continent could successfully break through to Earth Saint Master. Once they failed, they would either become a cripple or die. Just this single step had blocked the path of countless great Saint Masters. There were even quite a few great Saint Masters who were unwilling to take the risk and would rather remain at the same level of cultivation until they died of old age. As a result, the small chance of breaking through to Earth's Saint Master from eating the flesh of a Class 5 magical beast moved everyone present. At this moment, the auctioneer's loud voice rang out once more. Now, we will be auctioning off the corpse of the Class 5 Heavenly Wing Bull. The starting price is 5,000 purple crystal coins, and each increment must be no less than 100 purple crystal coins. I'll bid 6,000 purple crystal coins. As soon as the auctioneer finished speaking, someone from a VIP room immediately made a bid. 6,500 purple crystal coins. Another voice rang out from the VIP room. 6,600 purple crystal coins, 6,700 purple crystal coins, 7,000 purple crystal coins. Throughout the auction venue, shocking bids came from the VIP rooms one after another. At this time, no one in the auction venue could get a word in edgewise. Wanting to bid for a Class 5 magical beast was not something that could be done with just money. At the same time, one needed to have a certain level of strength. Otherwise, the Class 5 magical beast would probably be snatched away as soon as it left the auction house. As a result, the people who were bidding for the Class 5 magical beast all had a certain level of strength. They were not worried about it being snatched away from them. 8,000 purple crystal coins. The bidding for the Class 5 magical beast was extremely intense. In the blink of an eye, the price had shot up to 8,000 purple crystal coins. Moreover, the rising momentum showed no signs of stopping. 8,500 purple crystal coins. This Class 5 magical beast corpse is ours for sure. Anyone who dares to compete for it will become an enemy of the Yulan clan. A deep voice rang out from a VIP room. The voice was filled with arrogance. Clearly, the owner of the voice was determined to obtain the Class 5 magical beast corpse. The Yulan clan? Could it be the Yulan clan from Flaming Cloud City? It's actually the Yulan clan. The Yulan clan is the #1 clan in Flaming Cloud City. They are extremely powerful. Even the city lord of Flaming Cloud City treats the Yulan clan with respect. I didn't expect them to participate as well. Hearing the words Yulan family, the auction hall was instantly filled with a buzz of discussion. Even though the Yulan family was not a local power in Phoenix Sun City, they were still very powerful and had quite a bit of influence in the nearby area. Haha, people of the Yulan clan, you can't say that. This is an auction house. No matter what the item is, it will be won by the highest bidder. Our Harito clan is bidding 10,000 purple crystal coins. This Class 5 magical beast corpse is ours for sure. Just as the person from the Yulan clan finished speaking, a slightly aged voice rang out from the VIP room opposite them. Harito clan? Isn't that a power from Yellow Earth City? Yellow Earth City is 1,000 li away from Phoenix City. I didn't expect them to come as well. The Harito clan is extremely low-key. Although they aren't even in the top 10 of Yellow Earth City, no power dares to offend them. Even the biggest clan in Yellow Earth City, the Bai clan, doesn't dare to underestimate the Harito clan. That's right. I remember that a few years ago, the #1 clan of Yellow Earth City, the Bai clan, had a profligate son who offended the little princess of the Harito clan. In the end, he was beaten up by the little princess' personal guards. After that, the Bai clan didn't even dare to fart. It is said that the Harito clan is the most powerful clan in Yellow Earth City. It's just that they are extremely low-key and don't reveal themselves. There are even some people who don't know of the Harito clan. As soon as the Harito family's words fell, the entire auction hall was filled with a buzz of discussion. For a long time, no one made a bid. Even the Yulan family, who had been determined to obtain this Class 5 magical beast, had suddenly become mute. Yellow Earth City, Harito clan. Jinshin's heart stirred as he instantly memorized this clan. From the current situation, he could tell that the Harito clan wasn't simple. After a moment of silence, a middle-aged man's voice finally sounded from a private room. Haha, I didn't think that even the Harito clan would be so interested in this Class 5 magical beast. Since that's the case, then our Muda clan will not participate in the fight for this magical beast. I hope that the Harito clan will let us have the next class 5 magical beast. Hee, of course, 1 magic beast is enough for our Harlador clan. As for the remaining one, we will not participate in the contest. A slightly aged voice rang out from the Harlador clan with a faint smile on his face. Since that's the case, then our flowing cloud sword pavilion will also give the Harito clan some face and give up on this class 5 magical beast. Our Yang Gate will also give up on this class 5 magical beast corpse. Following the Harito clan's declaration, all the powerful factions gave the Harito clan some face and gave up on competing for this class 5 magical beast. Haha, on behalf of the Harito clan, this old man thanks everyone for going easy on us. The old voice from the Harito clan said with a faint smile. Soon after, the heavenly winged divine bull's corpse was successfully purchased by the Harito clan for 10,000 purple crystal coins. Now, we will begin the auction for the second class 5 magical beast corpse. Men, bring it up. Following the auctioneer's words, another stretcher was brought up. This stretcher was also covered by a large black cloth. This time, the auctioneer didn't waste any time. He directly lifted the black cloth and said, "This magical beast is also a class 5 magical beast, the Quick Cloud Beast. At the same time, it is also the last item in this auction. The rules are the same as last time. The starting price is 5,000 purple crystal coins, and each increase must not be less than 100 purple crystal coins." Following the auctioneer's words, terrifying numbers were once again announced from the various boxes. Perhaps it was because this was the last class 5 magical beast, but the competition this time was much more intense than before. Very soon, the price had risen from 5,000 purple crystal coins to 15,000 purple crystal coins, 16,000 purple crystal coins, 17,000 purple crystal coins, 20,000 purple crystal coins. In less than the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the price of the Quick Cloud Beast had risen to a terrifying 20,000 purple crystal coins. Moreover, there were still quite a few factions competing for it. Hearing the constantly rising price, Jianshin couldn't help but reveal a trace of a smile. Although the first class 5 magical beast corpse had only been sold for 10,000 purple crystal coins, which was a bit low, the second magical beast in front of him could probably make up for the first magical beast's low price. My Muda clan bids 20,000 purple crystal coins. My Yulan clan bids 23,000 purple crystal coins. My Jiloa clan bids 23,000 purple crystal coins. The Stream Cloud Sword Pavilion bids 24,000 purple crystal coins. My Yang sect bids 25,000 purple crystal coins. My Black Cloud sect bids 26,000 purple crystal coins. The bids were incessant. This was the last class 5 magical beasts corpse, and the various factions were fiercely competing for it. Everyone was increasing the price by 1,000 purple crystal coins. Very soon, the price of this class 5 magical beast corpse had risen to 40,000 purple crystal coins. The Yulan clan bids 45,000 purple crystal coins. Following the Yulan clan's bid of 45,000 purple crystal coins, the entire auction house immediately quieted down. Only the heavy breathing of countless people could be heard. 45,000 purple crystal coins had already exceeded the limit of what some factions could bear. Although class 5 magical beast corpses were rare, they could still be seen in some large cities. This price had already exceeded the value of a class 5 magical beast. After all, the Quick Cloud Beast was only an ordinary class 5 magical beast, and not an exotic species like the golden-striped silver snake. After a moment of silence, the originally lively auction house was finally broken by a voice. My Muda clan bids 46,000 purple crystal coins. The Muda clan had once again surpassed the Yulan clan in terms of price. Bang! Just as the Muda clan's voice faded, a dull sound suddenly came from the box belonging to the Yulan clan. In the VIP box of the Yulan clan, there were a total of 5 middle-aged men and an old man. A middle-aged man wearing a white robe heavily slammed his fist on the incense wood table in front of him, smashing a hole in it. The Muda clan actually dares to make things difficult for my Yulan clan. Very well, I will make you regret this. The middle-aged man wearing the white robe had a sullen expression as he gnashed his teeth and spoke. As for the other people, their expressions weren't very good either. If this continues, I'm afraid that the price of this Class 5 magical beast will rise to a level that even we won't be able to bear. The old man's expression was somewhat gloomy as he spoke. Other than this, what else can we do? This Class 5 magical beast has attracted many people. Right now, the factions that are still competing for it aren't any weaker than our Yulan clan. The middle-aged man, wearing the white robe, spoke somewhat angrily. The flowing cloud sword pavilion bids 47,000 purple crystal coins. Just at this moment, another bid was heard. Seeing the price rising higher and higher, the expressions of the Yulan clan members became increasingly unsightly. Chapter 175. 50,000 purple crystal coins. This Yulan clan is truly worthy of being the #1 clan in Flaming Cloud City. They are truly wealthy. This Yulan clan is truly wealthy. They are actually willing to pay 50,000 purple crystal coins for the corpse of a Class 5 magical beast. This seems to have exceeded the value of a Class 5 magical beast. Following the Yulan clan's second bid, the auction hall was immediately filled with a buzz of discussion. Jianshun, who was seated among the crowd, also revealed a surprised expression. Although a Class 5 magical beast was precious, there was still an upper limit to its price. 50,000 purple crystal coins had indeed exceeded the price it was worth. In the box of the Wandering Cloud Sword Pavilion, a few people in white robes sat with serious expressions. There were a total of 8 of them. Aside from 2 handsome youths who seemed to be in their 20s and a beautiful young lady, the other 5 were middle-aged men. The beautiful young lady who seemed to be in her 20s said, "This Yulan clan is truly determined to obtain this Class 5 magical beast corpse. The price is already increasing. If this continues, even if our Wandering Cloud Sword Pavilion is able to successfully obtain this Class 5 magical beast, we will have to pay an extremely high price in terms of money." The young lady's voice was like a yellow spirit bird, extremely pleasant to the ears. It said that the old patriarch of the Yulan clan is preparing to break through to Earth's Saint Master. With the help of this Class 5 magical beast corpse, his chances of success will increase by a lot, even though it won't be 100%. This Class 5 magical beast is indeed very important to them, said a middle-aged man. My master has already been stuck at the peak of Great Saint Master for more than 10 years. It's because he can't guarantee that he will be able to successfully break through to the Earth Saint Master realm. If we obtain this Class 5 magical beast corpse, my master might be able to successfully break through to the Earth Saint Master realm. Once my master successfully breaks through to the Earth Saint Master realm, the strength of our Wandering Cloud Sword Pavilion will increase by several levels. The person who spoke was a young man who seemed to be in his 20s. When his master was mentioned, a trace of pride appeared on his face. This was because his master was the pavilion master of the Wandering Cloud Sword Pavilion. A middle-aged man in a white robe said, "That's right. We have to do our best to get this Class 5 magical beast corpse. Although it's easier to find Class 5 magical beast corpses in some king cities, we're very far away from any king cities. Moreover, the road isn't very peaceful. Even if we buy it, it'll be very difficult to transport it back from the king cities. If we don't handle it well, we might even be robbed on the road. So right now, this Class 5 magical beast is the safest choice." With that, the middle-aged man in white robes, and the middle-aged man in white robes. The middle-aged man hesitated for a moment before slowly nodding his head. He raised his voice. "My drifting cloud sword pavilion bids 55,000 purple crystal coins." As soon as his voice fell, a series of low and deep exclamations came from the auction venue again. However, not long after the exclamation, another angry roar was heard from the opposite room. "The Yulan clan bids 60,000 purple crystal coins." Hearing the Yulan clan's bid, the expressions of the people in the Wandering Cloud Sword Pavilion's box turned unsightly. 65,000 purple crystal coins. After a moment of silence, the Wandering Cloud Sword Pavilion's Vice Pavilion Master made another bid. Currently, many major powers had already withdrawn from the contest for the Class 5 Magical Beast. Only the Wandering Cloud Sword Pavilion and the Yulan clan were still unwilling to give up. Bam! The sound of a table and chair shattering could be heard from the Yulan clan's box. Clearly, the Yulan clan was truly angered by the Wandering Cloud Sword Pavilion. Because of this sudden sound, the entire auction hall fell silent. Everyone raised their heads and looked in the direction of the Yulan clan's box. Wandering Cloud Sword Pavilion, this Class 5 magical beast is very important to our Yulan clan. Can't you give it to our Yulan clan? After this, our Yulan clan will definitely reward you handsomely. An aged voice sounded from the Yulan clan's box. The anger contained in that voice couldn't be concealed. My apologies. Our Wandering Cloud Sword Pavilion also needs the corpse of this Class 5 magical beast. As long as you can suppress us in terms of price, we will naturally give up. As soon as the aged voice sounded, a vigorous voice sounded from the Wandering Cloud Sword Pavilion's box. It wasn't hard to tell that the person who spoke was the Vice Pavilion Master of the Wandering Cloud Sword Pavilion. All right, Wandering Cloud Sword Pavilion, our Yulan clan will remember you. 70,000 purple crystal coins. The Yulan clan was practically gnashing their teeth as they made the bid. This time, the Wandering Cloud Sword Pavilion didn't make another bid. After waiting for a few breaths of time, the auctioneer, standing on the stage, finally spoke. The Yulan clan bids 70,000 purple crystal coins for the corpse of the Class 5 magical beast, Quick Cloud Beast. Are there any higher bids? Even though there were over 10,000 people seated in the auction hall, it was completely silent at this moment. After waiting for a moment, the auctioneer saw that no one else made another bid. Thus, he raised his voice once again. Yulan clan, 70,000 purple crystal coins going once. Within the Wandering Cloud Sword Pavilion's box. Vice Pavilion Master, although the Yulan clan's influence in Flaming Cloud City is strong, our Wandering Cloud Sword Pavilion isn't any weaker than them. Are we really going to give up on this Class 5 magical beast? The Phoenix Sun City isn't too far away from our Wandering Cloud Sword Pavilion. It's much safer to transport the Class 5 magical beast back from here. This is a rare opportunity for us. A middle-aged man spoke. Sigh. Hearing this, the Vice Pavilion Master sighed and said, "We aren't afraid of the Yulan clan. It's just that the value of a Class 5 magical beast has already exceeded our bottom line. Our Wandering Cloud Sword Pavilion doesn't have the financial backing of the Yulan clan. With the current high price, even if we successfully obtain the Class 5 magical beast, our Wandering Cloud Sword Pavilion's financial resources will definitely be depleted. This is extremely disadvantageous for us. Are we really going to give up just like this? This is such a good opportunity." A young man said with an unwilling expression. "We can only give up now. Furthermore, even if we purchase the corpse of the Class 5 magical beast, it's hard to say if the Pavilion Master will be able to successfully break through to the Earth Saint Master level with its help. If the breakthrough fails, it will be a huge loss for our Wandering Cloud Sword Pavilion. We can't bear the consequences," the Vice Pavilion Master said in a deep voice. Hearing this, the others silently nodded their heads. How difficult was it to break through from Great Saint Master to Earth Saint Master? Even with the help of a Class 5 magical beast, there was no guarantee of success. If they failed, they would either become a cripple or lose their lives. Yulan clan, 70,000 purple crystal coins going twice. Is there any higher bids? Yulan clan, 70,000 purple crystal coins going. Chapter 176. I bid 100,000 purple crystal coins. A deep voice suddenly sounded from the auction hall. Although the voice wasn't loud, it still spread throughout the auction hall. Hearing the bid of 100,000 purple crystal coins, everyone in the auction hall was stunned. Not only them, but even the people in the Yulan family's box were dumbfounded. 100,000 purple crystal coins. Although a 5th rank magical beast was precious, it wasn't priceless. 70,000 purple crystal coins was already a very high price. 100,000 purple crystal coins was far more than a fifth-rank magical beast should be worth. Following the bid of 100,000 purple crystal coins, the entire auction hall became dead silent. It was so quiet that even the sound of a needle falling to the ground could be heard. Only the heavy breathing of tens of thousands of people could be heard. Jianshan, who was sitting in an inconspicuous corner, was also shocked by this voice. However, his heart was filled with excitement. As the seller, he naturally hoped that his item would sell for as high a price as possible. However, this time, the price had risen from 70,000 purple crystal coins to 100,000 purple crystal coins. This really surprised Jianshan. Furthermore, what surprised Jianshan the most was that the voice didn't come from the VIP box, but from a place not far from him. Jianshan turned his head slightly and looked in the direction of the voice. In the end, his gaze fell on a person wearing a long gray robe. That person was an old man who looked to be in his 50s or 60s. His long black hair was coiled around his head like a flower bud, and there were some wrinkles on his old face. After a moment of silence, the entire auction venue broke out into a noisy discussion. Everyone couldn't help but look at the source of the sound. However, only a few people were able to capture the location of the person who made the bid based on the sound they just heard. The auctioneer, standing on the stage, was also shocked by this high price. After being stunned for a moment, he regained his senses. With an excited expression, he shouted with a trembling voice, 100,000 purple crystal coins. 100,000 purple crystal coins. Someone has bid 100,000 purple crystal coins. Are there any higher bids? In the private room of the Yulan family, the faces of several members of the Yulan family had turned ashen. However, no one said a word because even they were shocked by the high price. 100,000 purple crystal coins going once. Are there any higher bids? 100,000 purple crystal coins going twice. 100,000 purple crystal coins going thrice sold. As the auctioneer fiercely pounded the wooden mallet in his hand, the second-class magical beast, the Quick Cloud Beast, was finally bought by someone for the high price of 100,000 purple crystal coins. All right, this year's auction has officially come to an end. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. We will meet again on this day next year. Now, all the guests who have won their bids, please head to the backstage to collect your items. The host, Gurong, had a brilliant smile on his face. He had been hosting auctions in the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House for dozens of years, and this year's auction was the grandest one he had ever hosted. This was because an item worth 100,000 purple crystal coins had been auctioned off by him. To an auctioneer like him, this was definitely a supreme honor. After the auction ended, the people who had won their bids left their seats and headed to the backstage to pay the corresponding amount of money to exchange for the items they had won. After a slight hesitation, Jianshan also stood up and headed to the backstage of the auction house. He also had to go to the backstage to collect the money he had won from the two-class magical beasts. When Jianshan arrived at the backstage of the auction house, there were already quite a few people gathered there. This was the place where the people who had won their bids could collect their money. More than 100 people consciously lined up here, holding a small token that was specially issued by the auction house as they waited quietly. Mr. Wu Yun, our manager Yulian is waiting for you in the guest room. Please follow me. At this moment, a slightly aged voice sounded beside Jianshan. The appraiser of the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House, old Mr. Huang, was standing beside Jianshan and speaking in a low voice. Because Jianshan's appearance was still that of a middle-aged man, old Mr. Huang was able to recognize him at a glance. Then I'll have to trouble old Mr. Huang to lead the way. Jianshan smiled and said politely. Old Mr. Huang did not waste any more words and turned around to walk inside. Jianshan also followed closely behind old Mr. Huang. However, just as Jianshan took a few steps, he suddenly stopped and turned his head slightly to look at the small door he had just entered from. He saw two people wearing gray robes walking side by side as they slowly walked out from the small door. Of the two people, one was an old man and the other was a middle-aged man. The old man was the one who had bid a high price of 100,000 purple crystal coins for the corpse of the class 5 magical beast, Swift Cloud Beast. 2 distinguished guests, please follow me. Just as the 2 of them appeared, a waiter immediately went up to greet them. Lead the way, the old man said indifferently. Following that, he followed the waiter and walked towards the stairs leading to the 2nd floor. Wait! At this moment, a loud shout suddenly sounded. As soon as the voice sounded, several middle-aged men aggressively ran in from the small door and surrounded the 2 people in gray robes. This scene attracted the attention of all the people handling the transaction. Immediately, everyone turned their heads and looked at the scene with interest, as if they were waiting to see a good show. However, the waiter's expression did not change. This was not the first time he had seen such a scene. He tried to persuade them. Sirs, this is the Heavenly Phoenix auction house. Get lost. However, before the waiter could finish his words, he was fiercely pushed away by a man. The powerful force on his arm directly pushed the waiter's body back more than 10 meters, and finally, with a bang, the waiter fiercely slammed into the wall. His head made intimate contact with the hard wall, causing the waiter to faint on the spot. Traces of blood were left on the wall. Seeing this scene, Jinshin's expression changed slightly. A trace of strong killing intent flashed in his eyes. He obviously could not stand the rude and unreasonable behavior of these people. However, he did not lose his reason and rush up on the spot because he also knew that his current situation was not very optimistic. There must be many people asking about the class 5 Magical Beast Core. Chapter 177. Hearing the middle-aged man's words, the surrounding people were shocked. They looked at the gray-robed elder in astonishment. They had never imagined that the person who had spent 100,000 purple crystal coins to purchase the corpse of a Class 5 magical beast would actually be this ordinary-looking elder. The gray-robed elder revealed a cold smile and said, "That's right, I was the one who purchased it." The elder's tone was very calm. Hearing this, a trace of joy appeared in the eyes of the middle-aged man who spoke. He then sized up the ordinary-looking old man before him and sneered, "Very good. You actually dare to go against our Yulan family. You must be tired of living. If you know what's good for you, hurry up and hand over the Class 5 demonic beast. Otherwise, you'll have a good time." It's actually someone from the Yulan family. This Yulan family is really arrogant. They actually dared to do such a thing in front of so many people in the auction house. Seeing the arrogant appearance of the Yulan family members, Jinshin, who was standing in the distance, frowned slightly. The gray-robed old man and the middle-aged man beside him exchanged glances. A cold smile appeared on their faces at the same time, following which the old man's seemingly ordinary soul gradually turned sharp. He stared straight at the middle-aged man who had just spoken and sneered. "What does the Yulan clan amount to? Get out of my way. You're courting death. It seems that if I don't show you some power, you old thing won't listen to me obediently." The Yulan family members were instantly enraged. Following which, the middle-aged man stretched out his hand at lightning speed and grabbed the elder's neck. However, just as the middle-aged man's hand was halfway out, he suddenly felt his vision blur. Following which, he felt his neck tighten. He saw an old and withered hand. He didn't know when, but it had already tightly gripped his neck. The suffocating feeling coming from his throat made it impossible for the middle-aged man to breathe. The middle-aged man's eyes widened as he stared in disbelief at the withered hand that was gripping his neck. His heart was filled with shock because he hadn't sensed when the elder's hand had approached him. The old man grabbed the middle-aged man's neck with one hand. A cold smile appeared on his face as he said unhurriedly, "Young man, don't be too impulsive. If you lose your life, you can't blame anyone." As soon as he finished speaking, the old man casually waved his hand. The middle-aged man's cumbersome body was like a little chicken in the old man's hand. He was actually casually tossed far away by the old man. Finally, with a bang, with a loud thud, he slammed into the hard wall. The entire thick wall trembled violently for a moment. This sudden turn of events stunned the other members of the Yulan family. Looking at the middle-aged man who was lying on the ground, Unable to get up, all of them were enraged. They immediately took out their own saint weapons and slashed at the old man with powerful saint force undulations. Humph! You overestimate yourself. A cold light flashed in the eyes of the gray-robed, middle-aged man standing beside the old man, following which his hand suddenly emitted a fiery red light. The moment this fiery red light appeared, the surrounding temperature rapidly rose. The middle-aged man flicked his finger, and the fiery red light in his hand instantly shattered into pieces, following which sparks streaked across the sky like meteors, shooting towards the saint weapons that were slashing at him with lightning speed. Ding, 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 ding. When the sparks collided with the saint weapons, a few crisp sounds rang out. The saint weapons that the members of the Yulan family had used to slash at the old man were all broken into two. PFFF. A few of them spat out a mouthful of blood at the same time. Their entire bodies seemed to have suffered heavy injuries. They staggered backwards. Their faces had become incomparably pale in an instant. There was not a trace of blood in them. A few of them could not stand steadily and immediately fell to the ground. They could not get up again. Seeing the broken saint weapons of the few of them, the onlookers to the side revealed expressions of schadenfreude. Everyone present understood that the arrogant members of the Yulan family were done for. Even if they managed to survive, they would be reduced to cripples living at the bottom of the Tianyuan continent. However, even more people were shocked by the strength displayed by the gray-robed middle-aged man. With a flick of his finger, he had broken the saint weapons in the hands of several powerful people. Just how powerful was he? Young master, leave this kind of person to this old man. There's no need for you to do it yourself. The gray-robed old man glanced at the fate of the members of the Yulan family and spoke to the middle-aged man in a rather respectful tone. The middle-aged man casually waved his hand and walked toward the unconscious waiter. At the same time, he indifferently said, I really don't like these people. Just treat it as a small punishment for them. Whether they can survive or not will depend on their luck. To think that a puny Yulan family would be so arrogant. Humph. As he spoke, the middle-aged man arrived before the waiter and crouched down to check on his injuries. Fortunately, it's only some superficial wounds. It's not a big problem. After a simple check, the middle-aged man let out a sigh of relief. He then extended his hand from his sleeve and placed a jade-green ring on his finger. The middle-aged man took out a bag of medicinal powder from his space ring and smeared it on the back of the waiter's head. The gray-robed elder shook his head helplessly when he saw the middle-aged man's actions. Although his young master was vicious and merciless towards his enemies, he had a compassionate and kind heart towards ordinary people. He had seen this kind of thing countless times. The Yulan family only has themselves to blame for ending up like this. The appraiser, old Mr. Huang, who stood behind Jianshen's side. He then said to Jianshen, Mr. Wu Yun, please come with me. Jianshen nodded slightly. He glanced at the two gray-robed men deeply before following behind old Mr. Huang. However, his heart was not as calm as it seemed on the surface. I never thought that the two of them would be hidden experts, especially the middle-aged man. He's so powerful. If I've guessed correctly, the middle-aged man should be an Earth Saint Master at the very least, Jianshen's side. Jianshen followed old Mr. Huang to the second floor of the auction house through another passageway. In the end, old Mr. Huang led him to an elegant guest room. As soon as he entered the guest room, Jianshan saw the supervisor of the Heavenly Phoenix auction house, Yu Lian, sitting on a sofa quietly. It seemed like she had been waiting for a long time. Mr. Wu Yun, you finally appeared after disappearing for so long. A faint smile appeared on Yu Lian's face as she gently spoke.